AWS DevOps interviews for freshers, closing the gap.
Most candidates believe DevOps interviews are only for experienced engineers, and to some extent, that's true. Companies expect DevOps engineers to understand pipelines, automation, monitoring, and reliability. But here's the surprise, more and more companies are also hiring freshers into AWS DevOps roles. Why? Because freshers bring adaptability, eagerness to learn, and cloud-native exposure from training or internships. This video is designed to close that gap. Instead of teaching you to sound like a 10-year veteran, we'll take real AWS DevOps interview questions and show you how to answer them in 3 levels: good, better, and best. That way, you'll learn how to give fresher-level answers that are still impressive to interviewers. By the end, you'll know how to think, structure, and respond like a confident AWS DevOps fresher who can stand out in interviews.
Here are 30 most commonly asked AWS DevOps interview questions for freshers.
In this video, we'll cover 30 of the most commonly asked AWS DevOps interview questions for freshers. These questions focus on AWS services like EC2, S3, Lambda, CloudFormation, CodePipeline, CloudWatch, and more, because interviewers want to test if you can apply DevOps practices in the AWS ecosystem. Each question is answered in 3 levels: good, basic fresher response; better, impressive fresher with structure; and best, handling real-world constraints. Every answer also includes a quick review, why interviewers ask it, and which types of companies ask it more often. By the end, you'll know how to give confident fresher-level answers that stand out in AWS DevOps interviews.
1. What is AWS DevOps and why is it important?
Answer: good answer. AWS DevOps means using AWS services to implement DevOps practices like CI/CD, automation, and monitoring. It helps developers and operations teams collaborate better to deliver software faster. Review of the answer: this is a safe, correct, but shallow answer. It shows you know the buzzwords, but it doesn't prove understanding of AWS-specific tools or real benefits. Interviewers won't be impressed unless you connect DevOps to AWS services and practical outcomes.
Better answer: connecting DevOps principles to AWS services.
AWS DevOps means applying DevOps practices using AWS native tools. For example, AWS CodePipeline handles CI/CD, CodeBuild compiles and tests code, and CodeDeploy automates deployments. With these, developers don't have to set up complex servers manually. AWS CloudWatch provides monitoring and logging, while CloudFormation automates infrastructure provisioning. Review of the answer: this is much stronger. It shows not only the definition but also how DevOps works on AWS. You are connecting practices to actual services like CodePipeline, CodeDeploy, and CloudWatch. Still, it can be improved by showing how automation and reliability impact real-world business outcomes. Here is an example AWS CodePipeline YAML definition for CI/CD. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. The pipeline is linked to an AWS code commit repository named MyApp. The build stage uses AWS CodeBuild to compile and test the application. The deploy stage uses AWS CodeDeploy to automatically release the application.
Best answer: handling real-world constraints with AWS DevOps.
If the interviewer adds a follow-up constraint like, how does AWS DevOps improve reliability in production, you can expand by saying, with AWS DevOps, we can implement blue-green or canary deployments using CodeDeploy, so new releases don't take down live systems. CloudWatch alarms notify the team of issues, and CloudTrail tracks every API call for auditing. Combined, this means fewer outages and faster recovery times. Review of the answer: this answer shows maturity. You're no longer just naming tools, you're explaining reliability, monitoring, and rollback strategies. This proves you can think like a fresher who already understands how DevOps impacts real-world production systems. Here is an AWS CloudWatch alarm definition in JSON for monitoring production servers. Disclaimer: Always test code in a non-production environment. Monitor CPU usage for the specified EC2 instance. Triggers the alarm if CPU usage stays above 80%. Sends an alert to an SNS topic, which can email or notify the team instantly.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
Interviewers ask this first because it reveals whether you understand DevOps as a mindset or just as a buzzword. They want to know if you can connect DevOps practices specifically to AWS tools and real-world outcomes like speed, reliability, and automation. Freshers who give structured, AWS-specific answers stand out quickly.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. Tech product companies, Amazon, Microsoft, Atlassian, expect structured AWS answers. 2. Cloud-native startups, want freshers who can immediately work with AWS services. 3. IT services giants, Infosys, TCS, Accenture, usually ask basics, but advanced AWS answers stand out. 4. FinTech and banking, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Paytm, care about reliability, monitoring, and security. 5. Manufacturing and enterprise IT, Siemens, GE, Honeywell, value automation and practical DevOps use.
2. How is AWS CodePipeline used in CI/CD?
Answer: good answer. AWS CodePipeline is used to automate the build, test, and deploy steps in CI/CD. It makes sure code changes go through a pipeline before reaching production. Review of the answer: this answer is technically correct but very shallow. It does not show that you understand how CodePipeline is structured or how it interacts with other AWS services. A fresher giving this answer will sound like they memorized a definition rather than knowing how to use it.
Better answer: explaining AWS CodePipeline structure and flow.
AWS CodePipeline orchestrates the CI/CD workflow. It breaks the process into stages such as source, build, test, and deploy. Each stage has actions, for example, pulling source code from CodeCommit, building with CodeBuild, and deploying with CodeDeploy. This ensures that every change goes through an automated, repeatable process instead of manual steps. Review of the answer: this answer is stronger because it shows you understand the pipeline stages and services involved. But to really impress, you should give a concrete example of a pipeline configuration and explain how automation ensures speed and reliability. Here is an AWS CodePipeline definition in JSON showing source, build, and deploy stages. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. The source stage pulls the latest code from an AWS CodeCommit repository. The build stage compiles and tests the code automatically using AWS CodeBuild. The deploy stage pushes the tested build into production using AWS CodeDeploy.
Best answer: handling real-world CI/CD constraints with AWS CodePipeline.
In real-world DevOps, CodePipeline is used not just for automation but also for enforcing quality gates. For example, you can add a manual approval stage before deploying to production. You can also integrate third-party testing tools or security scans inside the pipeline. With CloudWatch events and SNS, you can notify teams when deployments succeed or fail. This makes the pipeline robust and production-ready. Review of the answer: this answer shows depth. You are no longer just describing the pipeline but showing how it fits into a real company's workflow with quality control, notifications, and monitoring. This demonstrates a DevOps mindset that freshers usually miss. Here is how you can add a manual approval stage in an AWS CodePipeline JSON definition. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. This specifies that the stage requires human approval before moving forward. This uses AWS's built-in manual approval action. Ensures this approval action runs first before the next stage can begin.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
Interviewers use this question to see if you understand CI/CD beyond the textbook definition. CodePipeline is AWS's main DevOps service, and they want to know if you can explain not only its structure but also how it's used in production pipelines with approvals, tests, and notifications. A strong fresher answer shows readiness to work on real AWS projects.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. Cloud-native startups. They rely heavily on CodePipeline for fast releases. 2. Tech product companies, Amazon, Netflix, Atlassian, expect detailed answers about CI/CD pipelines. 3. IT service companies, Infosys, TCS, Accenture, ask the basics but value fresher knowledge of AWS CI/CD tools. 4. Fintech and banking firms, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Paytm, want automation plus auditability with approvals. 5. E-commerce and SaaS companies, Flipkart, Shopify, Freshworks, focus on rapid deployment pipelines.
3. What is the difference between AWS CodeDeploy and AWS Elastic Beanstalk?
Answer, good answer, both AWS CodeDeploy and Elastic Beanstalk are deployment services. CodeDeploy deploys applications automatically to EC2 instances, while Elastic Beanstalk helps you deploy and manage web applications easily. Review of the answer, this answer is correct but minimal. It defines both tools but doesn't explain when or why to use each. The interviewer won't see any real understanding of how these tools differ in scope, control, or automation level.
Better answer, understanding control versus automation between CodeDeploy and Beanstalk.
AWS CodeDeploy focuses only on the deployment step. It lets you control exactly how and where your code is deployed, whether on EC2, Lambda, or on-premises servers. AWS Elastic Beanstalk, on the other hand, is a platform as a service, PaaS. It automatically handles provisioning, load balancing, scaling, monitoring, and deployment. CodeDeploy is ideal for customized environments, Beanstalk is ideal for fast, managed deployments. Review of the answer, this answer shows you understand the relationship. CodeDeploy offers fine-grained control, while Beanstalk provides higher-level abstraction. It's a strong fresher-level answer but can be made even better by linking to real AWS configurations and explaining how these tools can work together. Here is an AWS CodeDeploy AppSpec file in JSON showing custom EC2 deployment configuration. Disclaimer, always test code in a non-production environment. Specifies the files to copy from your source to the target EC2 instance. Runs a custom script before new files are deployed, useful to stop the running server. Runs a custom script after files are copied, typically restarts or verifies the server.
Best answer, handling real-world integration of Elastic Beanstalk and CodeDeploy.
In real-world scenarios, you can actually use both together. Elastic Beanstalk can manage the environment, EC2, load balancers, scaling, while CodeDeploy can handle custom deployment logic. For example, if your company requires a blue-green deployment model, Beanstalk will provision 2 environments and CodeDeploy will control the precise switchover. Together, they give speed and flexibility. Review of the answer, this answer shows professional-level insight. It demonstrates you understand not just the tools but how they integrate to solve real deployment challenges. It's the kind of practical thinking that turns a fresher answer into a job-winning one. Here is an Elastic Beanstalk configuration file in YAML defining environment variables and scaling. Disclaimer, always test code in a non-production environment. Defines environment-specific variables accessible within your Beanstalk application. Ensures there are always at least 2 instances running for redundancy. Configures Beanstalk to automatically set up load balancing for traffic distribution.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
This question helps interviewers assess if you can distinguish between managed AWS services and customizable ones. CodeDeploy and Beanstalk seem similar at first, but understanding the difference shows maturity in cloud design thinking. They're testing if you know when to prioritize control, CodeDeploy, versus convenience, Beanstalk.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. Tech product companies, Amazon, Atlassian, Adobe, focus on hybrid or blue-green deployment discussions. 2. Cloud-native startups want freshers to know how to use managed services like Beanstalk. 3. IT services companies, Cognizant, Infosys, Wipro, test basic tool differentiation in AWS DevOps interviews. 4. Fintech firms, Razorpay, Paytm, Goldman Sachs, look for reliability and rollback awareness in deployment answers. 5. Enterprise manufacturing and retail, GE, Siemens, Walmart Labs, value answers that include automation and scaling balance.
4. How do you use IAM roles and policies in AWS DevOps pipelines?
Answer. Good answer. IAM roles and policies are used in AWS DevOps to manage permissions. They define what each AWS service or user can do. For example, a code pipeline needs an IAM role to access CodeBuild or S3. Review of the answer. This answer is correct but generic. It tells what IAM roles and policies are but doesn't show you understand how they're actually used in a DevOps pipeline. It lacks real-world examples or clarity on the principle of least privilege.
Better answer, applying IAM roles and policies for AWS CodePipeline and CodeBuild integration.
In AWS DevOps pipelines, IAM roles and policies define permissions for each stage. For example, the code pipeline execution role allows the pipeline to trigger CodeBuild, fetch source code from CodeCommit, and deploy using CodeDeploy. Each service has its own IAM role to ensure security boundaries are respected. This separation follows the principle of least privilege, only giving the minimum permissions needed for each service to do its job. Review of the answer. This answer is solid. It connects IAM to real DevOps workflows. It explains role separation and least privilege, two key interview points. However, it can be further improved by showing how the policy JSON actually looks and how these roles are attached. Here is an IAM policy in JSON allowing CodePipeline to access S3 and CodeBuild. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Allows CodePipeline to fetch source artifacts from an S3 bucket. Grants permission for CodePipeline to trigger a build job in CodeBuild. Specifies the exact CodeBuild project ARN that the pipeline is authorized to access.
Best answer, handling real-world security and automation constraints with IAM.
In real production setups, IAM is critical for securing the pipeline. You can attach IAM roles not only to CodePipeline but also to EC2 instances, Lambda functions, and ECS tasks used in the deployment. For example, if a Lambda function updates deployment status, its IAM role must allow only that specific API call. You can also use AWS Secrets Manager and IAM conditions to ensure credentials are never hard-coded in scripts. Review of the answer. This is an expert-level fresher answer. It shows that you understand how IAM integrates across multiple AWS services in a secure, automated manner. You're demonstrating security awareness and operational control, traits hiring managers look for even at entry level. Here is an IAM role trust policy in YAML that lets CodePipeline assume a service role securely. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Specifies that this IAM role can be assumed by the AWS CodePipeline service only. Grants CodePipeline temporary security credentials to perform actions on your behalf.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
IAM is at the heart of AWS DevOps because it secures automation. Interviewers ask this to test whether you understand permissions, role delegation, and the concept of least privilege. Freshers who can explain IAM in the context of a real pipeline, not just define it, instantly stand out as practical and security-minded candidates.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. Tech product companies, Amazon, Microsoft, Atlassian, focus heavily on IAM best practices and trust policies. 2. IT consulting firms, TCS, Accenture, Deloitte, expect you to know IAM integration in pipelines. 3. Fintech and banking firms, Goldman Sachs, Razorpay, Paytm, emphasize least privilege and audit compliance. 4. Cloud-native startups, Test IAM in CI/CD contexts for automation readiness. 5. Enterprise companies, GE, Siemens, Walmart Labs, value security clarity and cross-service role awareness.
5. What is AWS CloudFormation, and why do we use it?
Answer. Good answer. AWS CloudFormation is an infrastructure as code, IAC, service that lets you define AWS resources like EC2, S3, or VPCs using templates. It helps automate resource creation instead of doing it manually from the console. Review of the answer. This answer is correct but shallow. It defines what CloudFormation does but doesn't mention templates, stacks, or reusability, the real strengths of IAC. It sounds memorized rather than understood.
Better answer, explaining templates, stacks, and reusability in CloudFormation.
AWS CloudFormation lets you describe your entire infrastructure using templates written in JSON or YAML. These templates define resources like EC2 instances, security groups, and load balancers. When you deploy them, CloudFormation creates a stack, a group of resources managed together. This makes your infrastructure version controlled, repeatable, and easy to update or delete. It eliminates human error from manual setup. Review of the answer. This answer is well-rounded. It shows understanding of CloudFormation structure and real benefit, consistency and automation. However, it can be improved by linking to DevOps use cases like CI/CD integration or demonstrating a real example of a CloudFormation template. Here is an AWS CloudFormation template in YAML that provisions an EC2 instance and security group. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Creates a security group that allows SSH and HTTP access. Provisions an EC2 instance defined as part of the same stack. Links the EC2 instance to the security group for access control.
Best answer, connecting CloudFormation with CI/CD for real DevOps automation.
In real-world AWS DevOps, CloudFormation is often integrated into CI/CD pipelines. For example, you can add a CloudFormation action in AWS CodePipeline to automatically deploy infrastructure when a new build passes testing. It also supports stack updates, drift detection, and rollback on failure. This means your infrastructure and code evolve together, a key principle of DevOps. Review of the answer. This is the kind of answer that impresses interviewers. You've gone beyond the definition and explained CloudFormation as part of an automated DevOps process. It demonstrates both conceptual depth and practical knowledge of AWS tools integration. Here is an AWS CodePipeline stage in JSON that uses CloudFormation for automated stack deployment. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Specifies that this pipeline action uses AWS CloudFormation for deployment. Defines the path to the CloudFormation template generated from the build stage. Ensures the stack is either created or updated automatically with each pipeline run.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
CloudFormation is fundamental to automation and infrastructure as code in AWS DevOps. Interviewers use this question to see if candidates understand infrastructure consistency, repeatability, and automation. Freshers who connect CloudFormation to CI/CD and real automation workflows immediately stand out as industry-ready.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon partner companies, always test IAC fundamentals like CloudFormation. 2. IT consulting firms, Accenture, Deloitte, Capgemini, emphasize CloudFormation automation examples. 3. Cloud-native startups, look for CloudFormation and Terraform understanding to manage infra as code. 4. Fintech companies, Razorpay, Paytm, Goldman Sachs, value IAC for compliance and repeatable environments. 5. Enterprise tech firms, GE, Honeywell, Siemens, check if candidates understand drift detection and rollback use cases.
Please check description or comment section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked, and system design. Required for your AWS and DevOps jobs interviews like AWS Cloud Migration Specialist jobs, AWS Cloud Financial Analyst jobs, AWS Solution Architect jobs, Cloud Security Engineer jobs, Kubernetes Admin or Engineer or Architect or Developer jobs, DevOps ISE Engineer jobs, DevOps Metrics and Observability Engineer jobs, DevOps CI or CD Engineer jobs, AWS DevOps Engineer jobs, Cloud DevOps Engineer jobs, AWS Java or Python Developer jobs, DevOps Engineer jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section, these questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people. Also for your interviews, you people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
6. How do you monitor AWS resources in a DevOps setup?
Answer: good answer. In AWS, monitoring is done using CloudWatch. It collects logs, metrics, and events from AWS services so you can see performance and troubleshoot issues. Review of the answer: this is the typical fresher response, short and correct but incomplete. It doesn't mention alarms, dashboards, or how monitoring fits into continuous operations. It's functional but doesn't show a real DevOps mindset.
Better answer: using CloudWatch for metrics, logs, and alarms.
In AWS DevOps, CloudWatch is used to monitor application performance, resource utilization, and operational health. It can track metrics like CPU usage, memory, latency, or API failures. You can set up alarms to trigger notifications via SNS or take automated actions like scaling EC2 instances. CloudWatch logs help developers trace issues, while CloudWatch dashboards visualize trends across multiple services in real time. Review of the answer: this answer adds depth. It shows awareness of metrics, dashboards, and automation. However, to reach the best level, you need to include event-driven responses, integrations with CI/CD, and a sense of proactive reliability, not just observation. Here is an AWS CloudWatch alarm configuration in JSON that monitors EC2 CPU usage and sends alerts. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that tells CloudWatch exactly what to watch. We're tracking the EC2 instance's CPU usage, the heartbeat of your server's performance. Every 5 minutes, CloudWatch measures how busy your instance is. Here is the code snippet that defines your performance red line. Once CPU usage crosses 80% for 2 checks in a row, CloudWatch doesn't just log it, it raises the flag and prepares to trigger an alert. Think of it as saying, something's cooking too hot, time to investigate. Here is the line for the automation hook. The moment this alarm triggers, CloudWatch calls this SNS topic. It's like your always awake messenger. Instantly, it pings your DevOps team through email, Slack, or PagerDuty, closing the loop between detection and human response.
Best answer: implementing proactive monitoring and automation in AWS DevOps.
In production-grade AWS DevOps, monitoring isn't just about observing metrics, it's about automating responses. For example, you can combine CloudWatch alarms with auto-scaling groups to automatically add instances when traffic spikes. You can also integrate CloudWatch with AWS Lambda to execute corrective scripts when anomalies occur. This ensures high availability without manual intervention. Review of the answer. This is a true, best answer because it shows not just what tools exist but how they're used together for resilience. You've connected metrics, alerts, and automation, which is exactly what interviewers look for in a DevOps engineer, even at the fresher level. Here is a CloudWatch alarm in YAML that triggers an auto-scaling policy when CPU usage increases. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the code snippet that names your alarm, scale out on high CPU. It's not just a label, it describes the exact action this alarm will take when CPU spikes, scaling out your instances automatically. Here is the line that sets your trigger point. When your servers cross 75% CPU usage for 3 straight minutes, AWS says, "Okay, traffic is rising, let's spin up more machines before users feel the lag." Here is the automation bridge line. The moment this alarm activates, AWS executes the attached scaling policy. In real time, it launches new EC2 instances to handle the load, giving your system the ability to heal and grow by itself.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
Monitoring separates average engineers from great DevOps engineers. Interviewers ask this to see if you think proactively. Do you just watch metrics, or do you design systems that heal themselves? They expect you to mention CloudWatch, SNS, and auto-scaling together, showing that you can automate reliability instead of reacting to failures.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon partnered companies, always test CloudWatch alarm setups and alert integrations. 2. Fintech firms, Paytm, Razorpay, JP Morgan, focus on proactive alerting and uptime reliability. 3. Product companies, Netflix, Atlassian, Adobe, check if you understand real-time dashboards and automation. 4. IT consultancies, TCS, Infosys, Accenture, ask this to assess whether freshers can monitor DevOps pipelines. 5. Startups and SaaS platforms, look for candidates who can use CloudWatch and Lambda to self-heal systems.
7. What's the difference between EC2 auto-scaling and load balancing in AWS?
Answer: good answer. Auto-scaling automatically adds or removes EC2 instances based on load, while load balancing distributes incoming traffic across multiple instances to ensure even performance. Review of the answer: this answer is technically correct but surface level. It shows you memorized the definition but doesn't demonstrate how they work together in a real-world system or how AWS services coordinate scaling and distribution.
Better answer, explaining how auto-scaling and load balancing complement each other.
In AWS, auto-scaling and load balancing are like teammates. Auto-scaling ensures there are always enough instances to handle your traffic, while the Elastic Load Balancer, ELB, ensures that traffic is evenly distributed among those instances. When demand spikes, auto-scaling creates new instances, the load balancer automatically detects them and starts routing traffic. Together, they make your system fault-tolerant and responsive under heavy load. Review of the answer: this answer connects the dots, it shows an operational understanding of how these two components synchronize. However, it can be elevated further by including how scaling is triggered by metrics like CPU utilization or target response time. Here is an AWS auto-scaling policy in JSON that increases EC2 instances when CPU utilization is high. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the code snippet that defines your scaling policy name, scale-out policy. This policy is the brain that decides when to launch extra servers when your traffic or CPU usage increases. Here is the key scaling directive. When triggered, AWS adds 2 more EC2 instances to your auto-scaling group, expanding your fleet to handle traffic surges before users experience slowdowns. Here is the safety interval, a cooldown of 300 seconds. It prevents AWS from launching too many instances too quickly by ensuring each scaling event has time to stabilize before another begins.
Best answer: integrating load balancer and auto-scaling for intelligent traffic handling.
In a real AWS DevOps setup, auto-scaling and load balancing are linked. The application load balancer, ALB, continuously checks instance health and routes traffic only to healthy instances. When auto-scaling launches a new instance, ALB detects it through target registration and begins routing traffic automatically. When demand drops, auto-scaling removes instances, and the ALB deregisters them gracefully. This synergy maintains both cost efficiency and uptime. Review of the answer: this is an expert-level fresher response. It shows an understanding of how infrastructure reacts dynamically. It highlights fault tolerance, cost optimization, and zero downtime scaling, proving you think operationally like an SRE or cloud engineer. Here is an AWS application load balancer target group configuration in YAML integrated with auto-scaling. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the code snippet that names your target group, the list of EC2 instances behind the load balancer. This is the logical collection that ALB uses to route web traffic evenly. Here is the health check configuration line. The ALB pings each instance on the route path, / to verify that it's healthy. If an instance stops responding with status 200, the ALB immediately stops sending traffic to it, protecting uptime. Here is the setting that defines how the ALB connects, directly to EC2 instances. In real-world setups, this can also target containers or Lambda functions for serverless architectures.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
This question tests whether you think about system design, not just individual services. Interviewers use it to see if you understand how AWS achieves scalability and availability together. Many freshers can explain auto-scaling or load balancing alone, but only standout candidates can describe their interplay under real traffic scenarios.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. Cloud-native startups want candidates who understand cost-effective scaling and uptime management. 2. Product companies, Netflix, Atlassian, Shopify, test understanding of load distribution and high availability. 3. AWS and partner organizations emphasize hands-on knowledge of scaling and target groups. 4. Fintech and SaaS, Stripe, Paytm, Razorpay, focus on maintaining responsiveness under variable load. 5. Large consultancies, Accenture, Deloitte, Infosys, check if you understand auto-scaling configurations and policy behavior.
8. How does AWS Lambda fit into DevOps practices?
Answer: good answer. AWS Lambda is a serverless compute service that runs code without needing to manage servers. You just upload your code, and AWS executes it in response to events. Review of the answer: this answer is accurate, but too basic. It sounds like it came from AWS documentation. There's no DevOps thinking here. It doesn't explain how Lambda helps automate, monitor, or integrate pipelines.
Better answer: using AWS Lambda for automation and event-driven DevOps.
In DevOps, AWS Lambda helps automate repetitive tasks without managing servers. For example, you can trigger Lambda when code is pushed to an S3 bucket to validate or deploy artifacts automatically. Lambda also integrates with CloudWatch for scheduled health checks, backups, and alerting tasks. It's perfect for lightweight automation, CI/CD orchestration, or quick operational scripts that react instantly to events. Review of the answer: this answer shows maturity. It connects Lambda to DevOps by mentioning automation and event triggers. It can be improved further by showing Lambda integrated in a real CI/CD flow, not just standalone scripts. Here is an AWS Lambda function in Python that triggers automatically when a new build artifact is uploaded to S3. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the function every AWS Lambda script starts with. This is the entry point that AWS automatically calls whenever the configured event, like an S3 upload, occurs. Here is the code snippet that extracts the S3 bucket name from the event data. Every time a new file is uploaded, Lambda gets this info automatically without you writing any listener code. Here is the automation hook. The moment a new artifact appears, this line triggers your AWS CodePipeline, no servers, no manual steps. It's a real-time bridge between CI/CD and serverless automation.
Best answer: integrating AWS Lambda into full DevOps automation pipelines.
AWS Lambda becomes powerful when combined with other AWS services for end-to-end automation. You can use Lambda in CI/CD pipelines for custom pre-deployment validation, automated tagging, or notifying teams on deployment success. Lambda functions can also auto-heal infrastructure by reacting to CloudWatch alarms or API gateway events. This is how you achieve self-operating systems, the holy grail of DevOps. Review of the answer: this answer nails the DevOps perspective. It connects Lambda with continuous deployment, monitoring, and alerting. It shows you understand event-driven infrastructure, which is a key skill AWS teams love to see in interviews. Here is an AWS Event Bridge rule in YAML that triggers a Lambda function automatically after a code pipeline deployment completes. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that defines the event source. It tells EventBridge to watch for any activity coming from AWS CodePipeline. This is how your automation begins. Here is the code snippet that specifies the condition. When CodePipeline reports its state as succeeded, this rule triggers instantly, no human clicks, no manual step. Here is the automation link. This Lambda function sends real-time notifications to Slack, ensuring your team knows the deployment status without checking the AWS console.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
Interviewers love this question because it tests whether you can think serverless. Freshers often only know EC2 or containers, but Lambda shows you understand event-driven DevOps, automation without servers. A great answer proves you can build workflows that scale instantly and cost nothing when idle.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS, Amazon, and partner firms test serverless automation understanding deeply. 2. Fintechs, Razorpay, Stripe, Paytm, use Lambda for notifications, compliance checks, and scaling alerts. 3. Cloud-native startups, expect Lambda event-driven DevOps pipelines from day one. 4. Product companies, Netflix, Atlassian, Shopify, rely on Lambda for deployment hooks and CI/CD integrations. 5. Enterprise consultancies, Accenture, Deloitte, Infosys, value Lambda for cost-efficient automation in large cloud setups.
9. How does infrastructure as code differ between AWS CloudFormation and Terraform?
Answer: good answer. Both CloudFormation and Terraform are infrastructure as code, IAC, tools used to automate infrastructure setup. CloudFormation is AWS native, while Terraform works across multiple cloud providers. Review of the answer: this answer is correct but minimal. It doesn't explain practical differences like syntax, workflow, or real-world DevOps integration. It feels more like a definition than an interview answer.
Better answer: comparing AWS CloudFormation and Terraform in workflow and ecosystem.
CloudFormation is an AWS native IAC tool that uses JSON or YAML templates to define resources, while Terraform is open source and uses its own HCL language. CloudFormation is tightly integrated with AWS services and offers drift detection, stack policies, and change sets. Terraform, on the other hand, supports multiple providers, AWS, Azure, GCP, and maintains infrastructure state externally, giving more flexibility for hybrid environments. In DevOps, Terraform is often used when teams manage multi-cloud infrastructure, while CloudFormation is ideal for AWS-only automation. Review of the answer: this answer is stronger because it connects features to use cases, AWS-only versus multi-cloud. However, to become a great answer, you need to explain how each integrates into CI/CD and what the DevOps lifecycle looks like with each. Here is an AWS CloudFormation template in YAML that creates an S3 bucket for deployment artifacts. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that defines the AWS resource type. CloudFormation knows this means it needs to create an Amazon S3 bucket directly through the AWS API, no CLI commands or SDK calls required. Here is the code snippet that specifies the actual name of your S3 bucket. This line ensures every developer deploying this stack ends up with the same consistent bucket. That's the beauty of infrastructure as code.
Best answer: explaining DevOps pipeline integration with CloudFormation and Terraform.
In real-world DevOps workflows, both tools can automate infrastructure provisioning, but they behave differently. CloudFormation integrates natively into AWS CodePipeline, making it perfect for continuous deployment within AWS. Terraform integrates with Jenkins, GitHub Actions, or even AWS CodeBuild using CLI commands. Terraform's state file lets it track every resource across clouds, while CloudFormation's stack mechanism ensures AWS resources remain compliant and easy to roll back. In short, CloudFormation gives deep AWS control, Terraform gives broad multi-cloud reach. Review of the answer: this is the kind of answer interviewers love. It shows you understand not only the tools but also how they fit into a DevOps pipeline. You're not just comparing features, you're explaining operational trade-offs. Here is a Terraform configuration file in HCL that creates the same S3 bucket defined above in CloudFormation. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the provider configuration line. It tells Terraform which cloud platform to talk to, in this case, AWS. This is how Terraform achieves its multi-cloud flexibility. Here is the code snippet that declares the resource. This tells Terraform to create a new S3 bucket named my_bucket, using AWS APIs automatically during Terraform apply. Here is the line that adds metadata tags to your infrastructure. In real DevOps environments, tagging helps with cost tracking, automation grouping, and policy enforcement across hundreds of resources.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
This question helps interviewers see if you can evaluate tools instead of memorizing commands. They want to know if you understand when to choose CloudFormation, AWS-specific, integrated, versus Terraform, multi-cloud, flexible. A strong answer shows architectural judgment, not just tool familiarity, a huge differentiator for DevOps candidates.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon expect you to know CloudFormation and IAC best practices. 2. Multi-cloud consultancies, Accenture, Deloitte, Cognizant, check if you can use Terraform for cross-platform automation. 3. Product companies, Netflix, Atlassian, Shopify, look for awareness of IAC trade-offs in multi-region deployments. 4. Fintech companies, Stripe, Razorpay, Goldman Sachs, emphasize auditability and reproducibility of IAC workflows. 5. Cloud-native startups, prefer Terraform-first workflows for flexibility and portability.
10. How do you manage secrets and environment variables in AWS DevOps pipelines?
Answer: good answer. We use environment variables in our build and deployment pipelines to store configuration details and credentials like database passwords or API keys. Review of the answer: this answer is technically true, but risky. It misses the most important point: storing secrets directly in environment variables or code can expose them. It lacks any mention of secure handling or encryption, which are crucial in DevOps pipelines.
Better answer: using AWS Secrets Manager and SSM parameter store securely in pipelines.
In AWS DevOps, sensitive credentials should never be hard-coded or stored as plain environment variables. Instead, we use AWS Secrets Manager or Systems Manager parameter store to manage and encrypt secrets. For example, in CodeBuild or CodePipeline, you can fetch these securely using IAM roles. This ensures secrets are decrypted only at runtime and are never exposed in logs. Review of the answer: this answer shows understanding of secure pipelines. It highlights AWS native solutions and IAM integration, a big plus. To reach best, it should include real pipeline-level automation and code integration that shows how these secrets are used safely during builds. Here is an AWS CodeBuild buildspec.yaml file that fetches secrets securely from AWS Secrets Manager. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the command that safely retrieves a secret from AWS Secrets Manager. The secret is decrypted only inside the build container and never stored permanently or printed in logs. Here is the line that temporarily assigns the secret to an environment variable named db_password. The secret lives only in memory for this build step, then disappears automatically when the job ends. Here is where the secret actually gets used. The build process runs your deployment script with the credentials securely in memory, never exposing them in plain text or storing them on disk.
Best answer: automating secret rotation and using IAM roles for zero-leak DevOps pipelines.
The best practice is not only fetching secrets securely, but also ensuring automatic rotation and least privilege access. In AWS, you can configure Secrets Manager to rotate credentials, like RDS passwords, automatically. In CodeBuild or CodePipeline, you should assign an IAM role with permission to read only specific secrets. This eliminates hard-coded credentials completely. You can also inject secrets directly as environment variables through the console or via JSON configuration. Review of the answer: this answer reflects deep operational maturity. It covers automation, IAM security, and continuous compliance. It's the kind of response that makes interviewers feel you can operate secure pipelines end-to-end. Here is an AWS CodeBuild project JSON definition that injects secrets from AWS Systems Manager parameter store using IAM roles. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that tells CodeBuild to fetch this variable securely from AWS Systems Manager parameter store. AWS injects the decrypted value at runtime using IAM permissions. Here is the reference path of the secret stored in parameter store. This lets multiple environments, like dev, stage, prod, use different credentials without modifying the pipeline code. Here is the build environment where all of this happens. Using AWS managed images ensures your build container has the latest security patches and IAM integrations for safe secret retrieval.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
Interviewers ask this to assess your awareness of DevOps security practices. Many candidates understand deployment, but few grasp how to manage credentials safely in CI/CD. This question separates those who can automate from those who can secure automation, a critical distinction in real-world AWS DevOps roles.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon expect you to know Secrets Manager and IAM best practices. 2. Fintech and banking firms, Goldman Sachs, Paytm, Razorpay, emphasize zero-leak credential handling. 3. Enterprise cloud teams, Accenture, Deloitte, IBM, use parameter store and CodeBuild integrations heavily. 4. Product companies, Netflix, Atlassian, Shopify, test if you understand secure automation patterns. 5. Startups, prefer lightweight IAM and Secrets Manager automation to avoid misconfigurations.
Please check description or comment section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem solving, generally most asked, and system design. Required for your AWS and DevOps jobs interviews like AWS Cloud Migration Specialist jobs, AWS Cloud Financial Analyst jobs, AWS Solution Architect jobs, Cloud Security Engineer jobs, Kubernetes Admin or Engineer or Architect or Developer jobs, DevOps ISE Engineer jobs, DevOps Metrics and Observability Engineer jobs, DevOps CI or CD Engineer jobs, AWS DevOps Engineer jobs, Cloud DevOps Engineer jobs, AWS Java or Python developer jobs, DevOps Engineer jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section, these questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people. Also for your interviews, you people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
11. How do you implement blue-green or canary deployments in AWS DevOps?
Answer: good answer. Blue-green deployment means having 2 environments, one active, blue, and one idle, green. You deploy the new version to green, test it, and then switch traffic when ready. Review of the answer: this is a textbook definition, but it doesn't show how AWS services actually implement it. There's no mention of CodeDeploy, ECS, or load balancers, making it sound theoretical.
Better answer: using AWS CodeDeploy and load balancer for blue-green deployments.
In AWS, blue-green deployment is commonly implemented using CodeDeploy with elastic load balancing. The blue environment serves current production traffic, while the green environment hosts the new version. After deployment, CodeDeploy shifts traffic automatically to green once health checks pass. This minimizes downtime and risk. If something goes wrong, CodeDeploy can instantly roll back to blue. Review of the answer: this is a strong explanation. It connects the abstract idea with AWS tools. But to reach a best level, it should demonstrate actual deployment configuration and also contrast blue-green with canary releases for progressive traffic shifting. Here is a sample AWS CodeDeploy deployment configuration for blue-green deployment on EC2 instances. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that defines the blue and green target groups. These groups connect your EC2 instances to a load balancer, allowing CodeDeploy to switch traffic safely between environments. Here is the section that specifies the production traffic route. CodeDeploy uses this listener ARN to redirect user requests from blue to green once the new version is verified healthy. Here is the configuration defining the rollout strategy. All at once means traffic switches instantly after validation, ideal for blue-green deployments with complete isolation between environments.
Best answer: implementing canary deployments with AWS Lambda or ECS for progressive rollouts.
Canary deployments go a step further. Instead of switching all traffic instantly, a small percentage, like 10%, is routed to the new version first. AWS CodeDeploy supports this natively for Lambda and ECS. For example, you can deploy a Lambda function with a 10% to 90% traffic split, then gradually shift all traffic if no errors occur. This approach reduces the risk of bad deployments in production. Review of the answer: this answer demonstrates complete understanding. It covers AWS native traffic control, monitoring, rollback, and the reasoning behind choosing one strategy over another, a hallmark of a real DevOps thinker. Here is an AWS CodeDeploy configuration for a canary deployment of a Lambda function. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that defines the canary strategy. CodeDeploy sends only 10% of live traffic to the new Lambda version for 5 minutes, watching for errors before scaling up to 100%. Here is the version reference of your new Lambda function. Each version is immutable, allowing safe rollbacks if this deployment shows performance issues. Here is the code block that handles failures automatically. If errors are detected during the canary phase, CodeDeploy instantly routes all traffic back to the stable version, ensuring zero downtime.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
Interviewers ask this question to gauge your deployment maturity. Anyone can talk about CI/CD, but blue-green and canary strategies prove you understand reliability and rollback safety, key DevOps principles. It also tests if you've explored AWS tools like CodeDeploy, ECS, and Lambda traffic shifting configurations.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon expect candidates to know blue-green and canary strategies deeply. 2. Product companies, Netflix, Atlassian, Salesforce, use canary rollouts daily to deploy microservices safely. 3. Fintechs, Paytm, Razorpay, Goldman Sachs, focus on safe, auditable release processes. 4. Startups, value blue-green for zero downtime user experiences. 5. Consulting firms, Accenture, TCS, Deloitte, often implement blue-green for enterprise migrations.
12. How do you implement centralized logging and monitoring across AWS accounts in DevOps?
Answer. Good answer. We use CloudWatch and CloudTrail to collect logs and metrics for monitoring resources in AWS. Review of the answer. This answer is functional but too narrow. It doesn't mention centralization, cross-account setups, or how teams actually consume those logs. It sounds more like using default monitoring rather than architecting it for scale.
Better answer, aggregating CloudWatch logs and CloudTrail data into a centralized account.
In a real AWS DevOps setup, especially with multiple AWS accounts, we centralize logs into a monitoring account. Each application account exports its CloudWatch logs and CloudTrail data to an S3 bucket or Kinesis stream in the central account. This makes compliance, auditing, and alerting easier. DevOps teams can then create unified dashboards and alarms from one place instead of checking each account separately. Review of the answer. This answer shows operational awareness. It mentions aggregation and centralization, which are key for multi-account environments. To reach a best level, it needs to mention automation, permissions, and real alerting integration. Here is an AWS CloudWatch log subscription filter configuration that streams logs cross-account into a central Kinesis stream. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that defines where logs will be streamed. It points to a CloudWatch logs destination in a central monitoring account connected to a Kinesis stream. Here is the IAM role that allows this cross-account log delivery. It ensures logs flow securely from one AWS account into another without exposing permissions broadly. Here is the code that defines the log filter pattern. Only logs that match this pattern, such as Lambda executions or API calls, are streamed, optimizing bandwidth and cost.
Best answer, automating centralized logging and monitoring with CloudFormation and SNS alerts.
For enterprise-grade DevOps, we automate centralized monitoring using CloudFormation stacks. These templates create CloudWatch log groups, metrics filters, and SNS topics for alerts in every new account automatically. Logs from multiple regions or accounts stream into a single Kinesis firehose, which delivers them to S3 or Elasticsearch for search and dashboards. This provides real-time visibility across all AWS environments. Review of the answer. This answer shows total control. It demonstrates automation, governance, and observability, exactly what interviewers want to hear when testing real DevOps maturity. It shows you can handle scale, not just tools. Here is a CloudFormation template snippet that sets up CloudWatch alarm and SNS alerting for centralized monitoring. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the resource type defining a CloudWatch alarm. It continuously monitors metrics from multiple Lambda functions across accounts. Here is the threshold that determines when an alert is triggered. If the total Lambda errors exceed 5 in 5 minutes, the alarm transitions into an alarm state. Here is the SNS topic that receives the alert. This sends notifications to the central monitoring account, where teams receive Slack or email alerts instantly.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
Interviewers ask this question to assess whether you can think beyond single account setups. Centralized monitoring proves that you understand how to build scalable, compliant, and observable cloud architectures, a key skill for AWS DevOps engineers.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon test awareness of multi-account observability architectures. 2. Fintech companies, Razorpay, Stripe, Paytm, require strong compliance and audit logging setups. 3. Enterprises, Siemens, GE, Honeywell, depend on centralized log monitoring for governance. 4. Cloud consultancies, Deloitte, Accenture, Wipro, expect knowledge of CloudWatch and Kinesis integrations. 5. Product companies, Netflix, Atlassian, Shopify, emphasize distributed logging and alert automation.
13. How do you ensure cost optimization and governance in AWS DevOps workflows?
Answer: good answer. We use AWS Cost Explorer and budgets to track spending and identify cost trends. Review of the answer: this answer is correct but too shallow. It's what everyone says. It doesn't show automation, tagging, or integration with DevOps processes that make cost management continuous rather than reactive.
Better answer: automating cost visibility and governance with tagging and budgets.
In AWS DevOps, cost optimization starts with visibility. We enforce tagging policies through automation, such as requiring every resource to have a project, environment, and owner tag. We then use AWS budgets and Cost Explorer APIs to monitor daily usage. Alerts are configured via SNS to notify teams when spending exceeds thresholds. This ensures both accountability and proactive cost control. Review of the answer: this answer demonstrates solid awareness, combining governance, tagging, with automation, budgets and alerts. To reach a best answer, we need to show how these measures integrate with DevOps workflows, like triggering alerts or remediation directly from pipelines. Here is an AWS budgets configuration in JSON that sets a monthly cost threshold and sends alerts via SNS. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the section that defines the spending cap. In this case, the DevOps team limits monthly costs to $500 for production workloads, a great governance control for small AWS projects. Here is the cost filter. It ensures the budget applies only to production resources tagged environment equals prod, helping avoid false alerts from test or dev environments. Here is the automation hook. When costs exceed the threshold, AWS budgets sends an alert to this SNS topic, triggering an email, Slack message, or even a Lambda-based cost control workflow.
Best answer: integrating automated cost control and governance into DevOps pipelines.
The best DevOps setups don't wait for cost overruns, they automate prevention. For instance, we use AWS Lambda functions triggered by CloudWatch events to detect untagged or idle resources daily. These Lambdas can shut down EC2 instances outside office hours or delete unattached EBS volumes. This proactive automation enforces governance automatically while saving costs. We also integrate cost checks in CI/CD. Before provisioning infrastructure, Terraform or CloudFormation templates are scanned to ensure compliance with tagging and instance type rules. Review of the answer: this is a complete, interview-winning response. It connects cost management, security, and DevOps automation seamlessly, showing you can think holistically like an experienced cloud engineer. Here is an AWS Lambda function in Python that identifies and stops idle EC2 instances to save cost. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that initializes the EC2 client using Boto 3. It connects the Lambda function securely to your AWS account to manage EC2 instances. Here is the code snippet that retrieves all running EC2 instances. This allows the script to analyze each one for tagging and usage before taking action. Here is the line that stops idle or non-production instances automatically. This single line of automation can save thousands in monthly cloud costs.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
Interviewers ask this to assess whether you understand that DevOps isn't just about speed, it's about sustainable operations. Cost optimization reflects ownership, and governance ensures accountability. This question reveals if you can balance automation with business sense.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon focus heavily on FinOps and tagging-based cost governance. 2. Fintech companies, Goldman Sachs, Stripe, Paytm, monitor cost, compliance, and resource hygiene rigorously. 3. Enterprises, Accenture, Deloitte, Wipro, evaluate candidates' ability to enforce cost policies at scale. 4. Product companies, Netflix, Atlassian, Shopify, expect integration of cost checks in CI/CD workflows. 5. Startups, value candidates who can blend automation and savings from day one.
14. How do you manage and deploy containerized applications in AWS using ECS or EKS?
Answer, good answer. We use Amazon ECS or EKS to deploy Docker containers. ECS is AWS managed, while EKS is based on Kubernetes. Review of the answer, this is a correct but shallow response. It sounds like memorized documentation. It doesn't show understanding of how containers are built, deployed, or scaled within a DevOps pipeline.
Better answer, using ECS and Fargate to simplify container management and deployment.
In AWS DevOps, ECS, Elastic Container Service, with Fargate allows fully managed container deployments without managing servers. We define our containerized app in a task definition, then use CodePipeline and CodeDeploy to automate deployments. ECS integrates with CloudWatch and Application Load Balancer for scaling and monitoring. For example, when a developer commits to GitHub, CodePipeline automatically builds the image, pushes it to ECR, and triggers ECS to run the new version. Review of the answer, this is a strong operational answer, it connects CI/CD with containers. To reach best, we should add how to handle Kubernetes orchestration, EKS, auto-scaling, and real-world deployment YMLs. Here is an AWS ECS task definition in JSON that deploys a Docker container using Fargate. Disclaimer, always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that tells ECS to use AWS Fargate, a serverless compute engine for containers. This removes the need to manage EC2 instances, ideal for fresher-level DevOps automation. Here is the line that specifies the Docker image stored in Amazon ECR. Each new build pushed from CodePipeline automatically updates this image tag to deploy new versions. Here is the block that defines which ports are exposed. This ensures the container can receive traffic from the application load balancer, typically on port 80 for HTTP apps.
Best answer, managing Kubernetes deployments with Amazon EKS for large-scale DevOps environments.
When managing microservices at scale, we use Amazon EKS, Elastic Kubernetes Service. It provides full Kubernetes orchestration with auto-scaling, namespaces, and rolling updates. We deploy applications via manifest YMLs that define pods, services, and deployments. EKS integrates with AWS IAM for RBAC, and CloudWatch Container Insights for performance metrics. CI/CD tools like Jenkins or CodePipeline can deploy updates automatically to EKS using kubectl or Helm. Review of the answer, this answer is production grade. It connects container orchestration with DevOps automation and scaling. It demonstrates both ECS simplicity and EKS complexity, showing deep understanding and adaptability. Here is a Kubernetes deployment YAML used in Amazon EKS for a web application. Disclaimer, always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that defines horizontal scaling. This tells Kubernetes to run 3 identical pods of your application for load balancing and high availability. Here is the container image definition. It ensures that EKS always pulls the latest stable image built and pushed through your CI/CD pipeline. Here is the section that exposes port 80 of the container, allowing it to accept traffic from internal services or load balancers.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
Interviewers love this question because containers represent modern DevOps. They test if you can explain not just running Docker images but integrating them into AWS managed orchestration systems. Great answers show you can handle scaling, rolling updates, and zero downtime deployments.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon expect detailed understanding of ECS, Fargate, and EKS. 2. Cloud-native product companies, Netflix, Atlassian, Shopify, test Kubernetes-based CI/CD automation. 3. Fintechs, Razorpay, Paytm, Goldman Sachs, check ECS usage for cost-effective microservices. 4. Enterprise clients, Accenture, Deloitte, IBM, focus on EKS governance and RBAC controls. 5. Startups, love ECS Fargate simplicity for quick, serverless deployments.
15. How do you secure CI/CD pipelines and prevent credential exposure in AWS DevOps?
Answer: good answer. We store credentials securely and make sure they are not hard-coded in scripts. Review of the answer: this is technically correct but incomplete. It lacks any mention of AWS native services, automation, or how to prevent exposure in real pipelines. Most freshers stop here, which shows only surface-level awareness.
Better answer: using AWS Secrets Manager and IAM roles for secure pipeline access.
In AWS DevOps, credentials should never be stored in plain text or inside the code repository. Instead, we use AWS Secrets Manager to store sensitive data such as API keys, database passwords, or tokens. The CI/CD pipeline, for example, CodePipeline or Jenkins, retrieves these secrets dynamically using IAM roles with least privilege permissions. This ensures that even if someone accesses the pipeline logs or code, they can't see the credentials. Review of the answer: this answer shows understanding of proper AWS tools like Secrets Manager and IAM roles. However, to reach a best level, we must mention how to prevent leaks in pipeline logs and third-party integrations. Here is a Python snippet that retrieves a database password securely from AWS Secrets Manager during a build process. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that initializes the AWS Secrets Manager client. It connects your build process securely to AWS without embedding credentials. Here is the line that retrieves the actual secret value from AWS. This replaces hard-coded passwords in your code, making pipelines safe from accidental leaks. Here is a simple confirmation message: notice we never print the actual secret. This ensures nothing sensitive appears in pipeline logs or console output.
Best answer: integrating pipeline-level encryption, masking, and ephemeral credentials.
For production-grade DevOps, we combine multiple layers of security. CodePipeline or Jenkins uses encrypted environment variables for tokens and assumes IAM roles instead of static keys. Logs are masked using CloudWatch log filters so secrets never appear in plain text. Additionally, we use temporary session tokens, STS, that expire after each deployment, preventing long-term exposure. This approach meets both security and compliance standards. Review of the answer: this is a complete and practical answer. It not only focuses on secrets but also on log hygiene, token lifecycle, and real DevOps operational behavior, the level that gets you noticed in interviews. Here is an AWS CodeBuild build spec.yaml that injects Secrets Manager variables securely during build time. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the section that tells CodeBuild to fetch variables from AWS Systems Manager parameter store. It prevents secrets from being hard-coded or stored in plaintext files. Here is the actual parameter key. During build time, this variable is decrypted and available only for that session, not visible in the code or console. Here is the command that runs your deployment script. It uses the secret at runtime without ever exposing it, keeping your CI/CD process secure end-to-end.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
Interviewers love this question because it checks whether you understand real-world security and automation. CI/CD security is not about hiding keys manually, it's about ensuring credentials are never exposed at rest, in logs, or in code. A strong answer shows you can think beyond basic pipelines and design for safety at scale.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon expect detailed answers about Secrets Manager, KMS, and IAM policies. 2. Fintech and banking, Goldman Sachs, Razorpay, JPMC, focus heavily on pipeline encryption and secret rotation. 3. Product companies, Netflix, Atlassian, Shopify, value DevSecOps practices like masking and short-lived tokens. 4. Consulting firms, Accenture, Deloitte, TCS, check for awareness of IAM roles and pipeline credential hygiene. 5. Cloud-native startups, look for practical awareness of not hard-coding secrets and using least privilege access.
Please check description or comment section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked and system design. Required for your AWS and DevOps jobs interviews like AWS Cloud Migration Specialist jobs, AWS Cloud Financial Analyst jobs, AWS Solution Architect jobs, Cloud Security Engineer jobs, Kubernetes Admin or Engineer or Architect or Developer jobs, DevOps ISE Engineer jobs, DevOps Metrics and Observability Engineer jobs, DevOps CI or CD Engineer jobs, AWS DevOps Engineer jobs, Cloud DevOps Engineer jobs, AWS Java or Python Developer jobs, DevOps Engineer jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section, these questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people. Also for your interviews, you people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
16. How do you handle blue-green or rolling deployments securely in AWS DevOps?
Answer: good answer. We use blue-green deployments to release new versions without downtime. The new version is deployed to a separate environment, and traffic is switched when it is tested. Review of the answer: this is a correct definition, but too generic. It shows theoretical understanding, not practical DevOps execution. It doesn't mention AWS-specific services, rollback automation, or security measures during deployment.
Better answer: implementing blue-green deployments with AWS CodeDeploy and Application Load Balancer.
In AWS DevOps, we use blue-green deployments to switch traffic between two identical environments, blue, live, and green, new. Using AWS CodeDeploy with an application load balancer, we deploy the new version, green, validate health checks, and then reroute traffic seamlessly. If something fails, CodeDeploy automatically rolls back to the blue version. This ensures zero downtime and secure rollbacks. Review of the answer. This answer shows solid technical awareness and practical experience. To make it the best answer, we should include automation hooks, IAM role separation, and audit logging to prove it is enterprise ready. Here is an AWS CodeDeploy deployment group JSON configuration for blue-green deployment using an application load balancer. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that declares the deployment type as blue-green. It ensures that AWS CodeDeploy will create a separate environment, green, and reroute traffic only after validation. Here is the configuration that defines a safety buffer of 5 minutes before terminating blue instances. This allows quick rollback if something unexpected occurs right after deployment. Here is the section that tells CodeDeploy how to reroute live production traffic via the application load balancer once green passes all health checks. It enables zero downtime transitions.
Best answer: securing rolling and blue-green deployments with IAM separation, encrypted hooks, and logging.
In secure enterprise DevOps setups, we enhance blue-green and rolling deployments with layered security. CodeDeploy uses distinct IAM roles for deployment and monitoring, reducing privilege scope. We also encrypt deployment hooks using KMS so that scripts or credentials used during deployment remain secure. Finally, CloudTrail logs every deployment action for auditability, who triggered it, when, and from where. Combined with AWS config, we can verify compliance post-deployment. Review of the answer: this is the perfect 10/10 interview answer. It blends automation, security, rollback, and auditability, showing that you think like an SRE, not just a deployer. Here is an example CodeDeploy app spec YAML with encrypted pre-deployment and post-deployment hooks. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the lifecycle hook that runs before new code is copied. It can be used for security checks or configuration backups before deployment begins. Here is the hook that executes immediately after deployment. It's often used to restart services, validate configurations, or trigger notifications. Here is the line that ensures the deployment scripts are encrypted using AWS KMS. It guarantees that sensitive scripts or credentials are never exposed in plain text.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
Blue-green and rolling deployments are the backbone of modern CI/CD reliability. Interviewers ask this to test whether you can deploy changes safely in production, not just build pipelines. They look for knowledge of rollback, auditability, and security in automation tools like CodeDeploy and CodePipeline.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon expect you to understand secure blue-green architecture inside CodeDeploy and ECS. 2. Google and Microsoft test awareness of rollback safety and automation hooks in deployment pipelines. 3. Fintech firms, Goldman Sachs, Paytm, Razorpay, value secure deployments and post-deployment auditing. 4. Enterprises, Accenture, Deloitte, Infosys, expect strong knowledge of IAM separation and compliance logging. 5. Cloud product companies, Netflix, Atlassian, Shopify, emphasize zero downtime and fast rollback automation.
17. How do you handle configuration drift and ensure consistency across AWS environments?
Answer: good answer. We use infrastructure as code tools like CloudFormation or Terraform to keep our infrastructure consistent. Review of the answer: this answer is correct but incomplete. It only mentions IAC tools, not how they actively detect and correct drift or how consistency is monitored automatically. Interviewers expect more operational depth.
Better answer: using AWS CloudFormation drift detection and automated audits.
In AWS DevOps, configuration drift happens when manual changes are made directly in the AWS console or CLI, bypassing IAC templates. To prevent this, we use CloudFormation drift detection, which identifies resources that deviate from their defined state. Scheduled checks using AWS config rules and CloudWatch events automatically flag these drifts. This helps teams fix inconsistencies before they cause outages. Review of the answer. This answer adds monitoring and automation, great for a fresher who understands IAC discipline. To make it best, we should include remediation, version control, and security enforcement through policies. Here is a CLI command that detects drift in a CloudFormation stack and outputs the drifted resources. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the command that starts a drift detection scan. AWS CloudFormation compares actual resource configurations with your IAC template. Here is the command that retrieves the drift detection job status. It confirms whether the drift scan is complete and ready for review. Here is the command that lists all modified resources. This allows DevOps teams to identify exactly what changed outside of automation.
Best answer: enforcing drift prevention with CloudFormation, AWS config, and automated rollback policies.
To handle configuration drift proactively, we integrate AWS config rules and drift detection into CI/CD pipelines. If a drift is detected, CodePipeline halts the next deployment automatically. We also apply service control policies, SCPs, in AWS organizations to block direct manual changes on production resources. For example, only CodePipeline's IAM role can modify EC2, S3, or IAM configurations. This makes production self-healing and fully compliant. Review of the answer: this is the gold standard DevOps response, combining governance, automation, and compliance. It shows foresight and control, demonstrating that the candidate thinks beyond deployment into lifecycle management. Here is an AWS config rule configuration that detects unapproved EC2 instance type changes. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the name of the AWS config rule. It identifies this policy as a check for EC2 instance type consistency. Here is the rule source that AWS uses internally to verify if the instance types match your allowed configurations. Here is the whitelist of permitted EC2 instance types. Any instance outside this list triggers a compliance alert to the DevOps team.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
Configuration drift is one of the most overlooked real-world problems. Interviewers ask this to see if you understand post-deployment governance and how to prevent infrastructure inconsistencies. This question separates coders from true DevOps engineers who think about sustainability.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon focus heavily on drift detection and IAC best practices. 2. Fintech and banking, JPMC, Paytm, Razorpay, require strong compliance and environment consistency. 3. Consulting firms, Deloitte, Accenture, PwC, test whether you can enforce governance via config rules. 4. Enterprise tech companies, GE, Siemens, Honeywell, evaluate environment reproducibility for audits. 5. Cloud-native startups, value automation that self-corrects misconfigurations without manual intervention.
18. How do you monitor and optimize AWS Lambda functions in a DevOps pipeline?
Answer: good answer. We use CloudWatch to monitor AWS Lambda metrics like invocation count and duration. Review of the answer: this is the typical fresher-level answer. It's factually correct, but incomplete. It mentions CloudWatch but ignores log insights, tracing, cost optimization, and performance tuning. It's a starting point, but not an interview-winning answer.
Better answer: using CloudWatch and X-Ray for Lambda observability and optimization.
In AWS DevOps, we use CloudWatch metrics and AWS X-Ray to monitor Lambda performance. CloudWatch tracks key metrics such as invocation count, duration, errors, and throttles. AWS X-Ray traces requests end-to-end, helping identify which part of the function or dependency is slow. We also use structured logging with CloudWatch logs insights to find patterns and exceptions quickly. This makes troubleshooting faster and supports continuous optimization. Review of the answer. This answer connects observability and performance, showing clear awareness of tools. To make it best, we should link it with pipeline integration, cost optimization, and automated alerting. Here is a Python snippet for adding AWS X-ray tracing in a Lambda function for end-to-end visibility. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the import that enables AWS X-ray integration for your Lambda function. It allows tracing of AWS SDK calls and function-level execution. Here is the line that patches all AWS SDK clients so every request is automatically traced. This is crucial for identifying latency or API bottlenecks. Here is the decorator that captures performance metrics and errors for this specific handler. It lets you visualize execution flow directly in the X-ray console.
Best answer: integrating Lambda monitoring and optimization into DevOps pipelines.
In advanced AWS DevOps setups, Lambda monitoring is automated as part of CI/CD. Each deployment registers custom CloudWatch alarms that track function duration, memory usage, and error rate. AWS budgets or cost anomaly detection monitors Lambda cost spikes, triggering alerts via SNS. Additionally, Lambda power tuning, through step functions or SAM CLI, automatically determines the most efficient memory configuration to reduce costs. All logs and traces are exported to a central observability account for unified dashboards. Review of the answer. This answer demonstrates deep operational understanding, combining cost, performance, and automation. It shows you think about running code efficiently, not just deploying it. Here is a CloudWatch alarm configuration JSON that alerts when Lambda error rate exceeds 5% across invocations. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that defines the key metric being tracked: Lambda function errors. It helps detect runtime exceptions or failures automatically. Here is the threshold that sets the alert condition. If more than 5 errors occur within 5 minutes, CloudWatch raises an alarm. Here is the SNS topic where alerts are sent. This allows DevOps teams to receive instant notifications via Slack, email, or PagerDuty.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
Interviewers ask this question to assess whether you treat serverless applications with the same rigor as traditional infrastructure. They want to see if you know how to measure, trace, and optimize Lambda performance, not just write function code. Great answers show understanding of both observability and cost efficiency.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon. Test deep knowledge of Lambda observability tools like CloudWatch and X-ray. 2. Fintech companies, Paytm, Razorpay, Goldman Sachs, focus on error monitoring and cost efficiency in serverless setups. 3. Product firms, Netflix, Atlassian, Shopify, emphasize tracing, concurrency limits, and alerting automation. 4. Consulting firms, Deloitte, Accenture, Infosys, test if candidates can integrate Lambda metrics into CI/CD dashboards. 5. Startups, prefer practical knowledge of debugging and optimizing serverless costs using power tuning.
19. How do you manage cross-account or cross-region deployments in AWS DevOps?
Answer: good answer. We can deploy to multiple AWS regions or accounts by creating separate pipelines or using AWS CLI commands with different credentials. Review of the answer: this is the basic fresher-level understanding. It's technically correct but not operationally sound. It lacks details on how to handle authentication securely, maintain consistency, and automate region-level rollouts. Interviewers will expect a structured DevOps answer with AWS native solutions.
Better answer: automating cross-region deployments using AWS CodePipeline and IAM roles.
In AWS DevOps, cross-region deployments are managed using AWS CodePipeline with region-specific deployment stages. Each region or account uses a cross-account IAM role with minimal privileges. The pipeline assumes the target role to deploy resources using CloudFormation, CodeDeploy, or Terraform. Artifacts are stored in an S3 bucket that is replicated using S3 cross-region replication, CRR, ensuring all deployment packages are consistent. This ensures uniform application rollout and secure access control. Review of the answer. This answer introduces IAM security and automation using CodePipeline. To make it best, we should add details about secrets management, rollback mechanisms, and how we monitor synchronization across accounts. Here is an AWS CodePipeline cross-account role trust policy that allows a central DevOps account to assume roles in target accounts. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the exact ARN of the role in the DevOps master account. This line explicitly authorizes that role to assume permissions in the target account. Here is the permission that allows AWS CodePipeline to temporarily assume this role. This ensures least privilege, temporary access instead of permanent credentials.
Best answer: implementing multi-account, cross-region CI/CD with secure artifact sharing and monitoring.
For enterprise-scale AWS DevOps, we implement a multi-account and cross-region CI/CD strategy. A centralized DevOps account holds the main code pipeline and CodeBuild setup. Artifacts are stored in an encrypted S3 bucket with cross-region replication enabled. The pipeline assumes roles in target accounts to deploy to their respective regions. CloudWatch and AWS Config monitor resource drift across all environments. Additionally, Secrets Manager securely stores and shares credentials, like Git tokens or API keys, for deployments. If any deployment fails in one region, rollback is triggered only for that region, maintaining high availability globally. Review of the answer. This is an expert-level response, showing enterprise DevOps thinking. It balances scalability, isolation, and resilience, key attributes of real-world AWS multi-region setups. Here is a snippet of a code pipeline definition YAML that deploys to multiple AWS regions using cross-account IAM roles. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the configuration that deploys the CloudFormation stack to the US region. It ensures consistent resource definitions per geography. Here is the cross-account IAM role used for deployments. It allows the central pipeline to deploy securely into a target AWS account. Here is the same template reused for the EU region, showing how multi-region deployments stay synchronized while keeping isolated permissions.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
This question helps interviewers evaluate whether you can think beyond a single AWS account. Real-world enterprises have multiple accounts for isolation, dev, staging, prod, and multiple regions for redundancy. Interviewers use this to test your understanding of role-based security, automation, and fault-tolerant deployment design.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon deeply focus on IAM role assumptions and cross-region code pipeline setups. 2. Google Cloud SRE panel checks for awareness of multi-region failover design principles. 3. Fintech firms, Razorpay, Paytm, Stripe, value regional isolation and high availability. 4. Consulting companies, Deloitte, PwC, Accenture, expect multi-account automation governance knowledge. 5. Enterprise companies, GE, Siemens, Honeywell, look for controlled access and compliance in multi-account setups.
20. How do you ensure cost optimization and monitoring in an AWS DevOps pipeline?
Answer: good answer. We can use AWS Cost Explorer or budgets to monitor spending. Review of the answer: this answer is okay for beginners, but it is too shallow. It doesn't explain proactive cost control, tagging strategies, or automation. It sounds like you check reports manually, which is not what DevOps is about. Interviewers want to hear how cost monitoring is integrated into automation and feedback loops.
Better answer: automating cost visibility with AWS budgets, CloudWatch, and tagging.
In AWS DevOps, we use a combination of AWS budgets, CloudWatch, and cost allocation tags to control expenses. Each environment, dev, staging, prod, has its own budget and alerts. For instance, a CloudWatch alarm triggers if monthly spending exceeds 80% of the defined budget. Tagging resources with cost center labels, like environment equals dev or project equals retail app, ensures cost transparency. AWS budgets then emails or sends SNS alerts to the DevOps team when usage nears thresholds. Review of the answer: this shows structured monitoring but still lacks real-world automation and corrective action. To make it best, include automated cleanups, idle resource detection, and dynamic scaling policies. Here is an AWS budget's JSON configuration that sends alerts when EC2 cost exceeds 80% of the defined limit. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the budget limit definition. It sets a $100 monthly spending cap for EC2 usage. Here is the threshold that triggers the budget alert when 80% of the limit is reached, giving DevOps time to act. Here is the contact address receiving the alerts. The budget system emails this team when spending crosses the threshold.
Best answer: enforcing cost optimization using automation, resource cleanup, and scaling.
In advanced AWS DevOps setups, cost optimization is built into the pipeline lifecycle. Lambda functions run scheduled cleanups to stop idle EC2 or RDS instances overnight. Auto-scaling policies dynamically reduce capacity when load drops. Spot instances are used for non-critical jobs like staging builds. CloudWatch dashboards visualize service costs by environment. Additionally, AWS Compute Optimizer and Trusted Advisor are integrated into CI/CD to make right-sizing recommendations automatically. All cost metrics are fed into Slack via SNS for live awareness. Review of the answer: this is a powerful answer that merges automation, monitoring, and cost governance. It shows you understand not just how to save money, but how to make cost control an active part of the DevOps lifecycle. Here is a Python Lambda function that automatically stops idle EC2 instances to save cost. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that fetches all EC2 instances currently running in the dev environment. It forms the discovery step for cost optimization. Here is the line that logs which instance is being stopped, useful for CloudWatch logs and audit trails. Here is the command that triggers the cost-saving action. It gracefully stops idle instances, reducing unnecessary spending.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
This question reveals whether you understand the business side of DevOps. Cost optimization is a major part of cloud maturity, even more than automation itself. Interviewers want to see if you can think about scaling, efficiency, and budget alerts. Great DevOps engineers balance speed, reliability, and cost efficiency, not just one.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon test deep knowledge of budgets, Cost Explorer, and resource automation. 2. Fintech companies, Goldman Sachs, Paytm, Razorpay, focus on compliance and cost monitoring per environment. 3. Product startups, Notion, Freshworks, Zoho, value resource cleanup and scaling policies to manage budgets. 4. Consulting firms, Deloitte, Accenture, PwC, evaluate automation-based cost reduction strategies. 5. Enterprise firms, GE, Honeywell, Siemens, prioritize governance and scheduled optimization audits.
Please check description or comment section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked and system design. Required for your AWS and DevOps jobs interviews like AWS Cloud Migration Specialist jobs, AWS Cloud Financial Analyst jobs, AWS Solution Architect jobs, Cloud Security Engineer jobs, Kubernetes Admin or Engineer or Architect or Developer jobs, DevOps ISE Engineer jobs, DevOps Metrics and Observability Engineer jobs, DevOps CI or CD engineer jobs, AWS DevOps engineer jobs, Cloud DevOps engineer jobs, AWS Java or Python developer jobs, DevOps engineer jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section, these questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people. Also for your interviews, you people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
21. How do you ensure high availability and disaster recovery, HA or DR, in AWS DevOps?
Answer: good answer. We use AWS services like auto-scaling and multi-AZ RDS to ensure high availability. Review of the answer: this is a basic and technically correct answer but shallow. It shows awareness of AWS features but not their integration into DevOps workflows. It lacks mention of automation, failover testing, or recovery objectives, RTO or RPO. Interviewers will expect an answer that connects HA or DR with CI/CD, monitoring, and automation.
Better answer: automating high availability using multi-AZ, load balancers, and auto-scaling.
In AWS DevOps, high availability is achieved by distributing workloads across multiple availability zones using elastic load balancing and auto-scaling groups. For databases, multi-AZ RDS automatically replicates data synchronously to a standby instance in another zone. The CI/CD pipeline provisions these components automatically using CloudFormation or Terraform templates, ensuring infrastructure consistency across environments. Review of the answer: this answer demonstrates technical clarity but doesn't yet touch on disaster recovery or how to test failover. To make it best, add recovery mechanisms, automation triggers, and monitoring integration. Here is an AWS CloudFormation snippet that provisions an auto-scaling group with multi-AZ configuration for high availability. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the property that assigns the auto-scaling group to multiple subnets across availability zones, ensuring redundancy within a region. Here is the configuration that guarantees at least 2 instances are always running, even during maintenance or a zone outage. Here is where we specify multiple AZs, like US East 1A and US East 1B. This spreads resources across zones to prevent a single point of failure.
Best answer: implementing full disaster recovery with cross-region backups and automated failover.
For true disaster recovery, we use cross-region replication and infrastructure automation. S3 buckets use cross-region replication, CRR, RDS uses read replicas in secondary regions, and Route 53 health checks automatically reroute traffic during regional outages. CloudFormation templates and backup scripts stored in CodeCommit ensure the entire infrastructure can be reprovisioned quickly. Recovery time objective, RTO, and recovery point objective, RPO, are defined and tested regularly through failover simulations integrated into CI/CD. Review of the answer: this is a complete 10/10 answer. It combines architecture, automation, monitoring, and testing. It demonstrates operational maturity, showing you can handle real-world HA or DR requirements in production. Here is an AWS Route 53 health check configuration JSON that enables automatic DNS failover between primary and secondary regions. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the protocol that Route 53 uses to test endpoint health. it sends periodic HTTP requests to the primary service. Here is the threshold that defines how many consecutive failures must occur before Route 53 marks the endpoint as unhealthy. Here is the path that Route 53 checks for application health. It's usually a lightweight API endpoint that returns status 200 if the service is up.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
High availability and disaster recovery are at the heart of DevOps reliability. Interviewers ask this to evaluate if you understand redundancy, automation, and measurable recovery objectives. They want to know if you can plan for failures and automate responses instead of relying on manual fixes.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon focus on multi-region, cross-AZ reliability and Route 53 failover. 2. Google and Microsoft expect answers about SRE style automation and RTO or RPO design. 3. Fintech firms, Razorpay, Stripe, Paytm, prioritize data replication and real-time backup strategies. 4. Consulting firms, Deloitte, Accenture, PwC, assess knowledge of DR testing and governance compliance. 5. Enterprise firms, GE, Siemens, Honeywell, emphasize automation in DR drills and regulatory resilience.
22. How do you manage logging, observability, and alerting in AWS DevOps?
Answer: good answer. We use CloudWatch to collect logs and set basic alarms. Review of the answer: this is a standard fresher-level reply, correct but too simplistic. It misses the end-to-end observability story, structured logs, centralized aggregation, trace correlation, alert noise reduction, and automated remediation. Interviewers expect you to tie logging into the whole DevOps lifecycle.
Better answer: centralized logs, structured logging, and tracing.
A practical DevOps approach is to centralize logs, CloudWatch logs to Kinesis to S3 or Elasticsearch, and use structured JSON logs so queries are precise. Use CloudWatch logs insights to query logs, and AWS X-Ray, or OpenTelemetry, to correlate traces across services. Set tuned CloudWatch alarms, with proper thresholds and anomaly detection, and route alerts to SNS or PagerDuty to avoid alert fatigue. Review of the answer: this ties tools to outcomes, searchable logs, trace correlation, and alerting integration. To reach the best level, explain automatic suppression of repeated alerts, retention or archival policies, and how alerts feed back into CI/CD for automated rollbacks or mitigation. Here is a CloudWatch logs insights query that counts error occurrences per 5-minute window and shows the latest results. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that selects the essential fields we need, timestamp for ordering and message for content, so queries remain fast and focused. Here is the filter that narrows results to only error messages. Using a regex style match keeps queries flexible for different log formats. Here is the aggregation that groups errors into 5-minute buckets and counts them. This is perfect for driving alarms based on error rate spikes rather than single transient failures.
Best answer: automated, noise-reduced alerting with centralized observability.
The best practice automates the observability lifecycle. Structured logs plus traces are shipped to a centralized observability account. Logs, insights and X-ray detect anomalies. Anomaly detections and composite alarms reduce noise. Alerts trigger runbooks or Lambda-based mitigation, for example, auto-scaling, circuit breakers, and create incidents only when escalation is required. Retain raw logs in S3 for compliance and use lifecycle rules to move older data to Glacier. This ensures both operability and cost control. Review of the answer: this demonstrates operational depth. You're not only collecting data, you're automating responses and keeping signal-to-noise high. Interviewers love this because it shows you think about long-term runnability, not just short-term monitoring. Here is a CloudWatch log subscription filter JSON that streams specific logs cross-account into a central Kinesis destination. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the exact destination ARN where logs are forwarded. This connects the application account to the centralized ingestion pipeline for aggregation and long-term storage. Here is the IAM role ARN that grants the source account permission to stream logs into the central account, ensuring cross-account delivery is least privilege and auditable. Here is the filter pattern that picks which log lines to stream. Filtering at the source reduces cost and noise by sending only relevant structured entries to the central pipeline. Here is a CloudWatch alarm JSON that triggers when error count in metrics exceeds 20 within 5 minutes. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the alarm name that groups the monitoring rule. Use descriptive names so runbooks can map alarms to remediation steps quickly. Here is the metric that the alarm watches, in this example, a custom metric generated from logs insights or a Lambda that pushes aggregated error counts. Here is the numeric trigger. When the aggregated error count exceeds 20 within a single 5-minute period, the alarm fires. Choosing a sensible threshold avoids noisy alerts from transient glitches.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
Because logging plus observability plus alerting are how systems are operated at scale. This question checks whether you understand not only the tools, but how they fit into incident response, cost control, and automation. Great answers demonstrate data-driven alerting, traceable incidents, and automated mitigations.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon expect deep knowledge of CloudWatch logs, X-ray, and logs insights. 2. Product firms, Netflix, Atlassian, Shopify, require trace correlation and alert noise reduction. 3. Fintech, Stripe, Paytm, Razorpay, emphasize observability with compliance and retention. 4. Consultancies, Deloitte, Accenture, PwC, ask about cross-account aggregation and auditability. 5. Startups, look for practical, cost-aware logging strategies.
23. How do you manage configuration management and environment consistency in AWS DevOps?
Answer: good answer. We use tools like AWS Systems Manager Parameter Store or Ansible to manage configurations. Review of the answer: this is a good starting point. It shows awareness of configuration tools but doesn't demonstrate how they ensure environment consistency or integrate into CI/CD. Interviewers expect you to describe how these tools work together to guarantee identical configurations across environments.
Better answer: parameterized configuration management using AWS Systems Manager Parameter Store.
In AWS DevOps, we maintain consistency by externalizing environment-specific parameters in Systems Manager Parameter Store or AWS Secrets Manager. These values, like database strings, API endpoints, or feature flags, are fetched dynamically by the pipeline or at runtime, ensuring that configuration differences are managed centrally and securely. Review of the answer: this answer adds structure. It shows separation of code and configuration. To elevate it further, integrate automation, like dynamic versioning or drift detection, and show how configuration validation is enforced before deployment. Here is an AWS Systems Manager Parameter Store JSON definition that defines configuration for multiple environments. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the key name of the parameter. Prefixing with environment, like /myapp or dev/, helps maintain clear separation between configurations. Here is the actual configuration value, the database URL specific to the development environment. Each environment, dev, staging, prod, would have its own distinct parameter. Here is the flag that ensures updates overwrite existing parameters. It allows pipelines to update configs automatically during deployment.
Best answer: full configuration management with versioning, drift detection, and validation.
For enterprise-grade setups, we combine AWS Systems Manager Parameter Store with CloudFormation and config rules. Parameter versions are managed automatically with deployment IDs. Config rules detect drift. If a parameter is modified manually, the rule flags it for review. Lambda validation functions verify configuration values, for example, proper database endpoints or regions, before applying them. This ensures immutable infrastructure and consistent environments. Review of the answer. This answer displays complete DevOps maturity. It connects configuration, automation, and governance. It demonstrates proactive management of drift and validation, something even many experienced engineers overlook. Here is a Python Lambda function that validates parameter store values before deployment. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that retrieves the specific environment parameter from parameter store. The Lambda fetches it dynamically to validate configurations before a deployment. Here is the regex-based validation check that ensures the database URL conforms to the correct RDS hostname pattern. Here is the conditional safeguard: if validation fails, the Lambda throws an error, blocking the pipeline from using faulty configuration values.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
Because configuration drift is a major cause of production incidents. This question checks whether you can maintain consistency across dev, staging, and production while still allowing flexible configuration management. Good candidates talk about parameterization, validation, and version control integration.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon focus on automation of parameter store and secrets manager. 2. Fintech firms, PayPal, Razorpay, Stripe, emphasize drift detection and validation logic. 3. Consulting firms, Deloitte, Accenture, ask about cross-account configuration governance. 4. SaaS companies, Atlassian, Freshworks, focus on environment parity between test and prod. 5. IT services firms, TCS, Infosys, Cognizant, look for basic parameterization and secrets handling knowledge.
24. How would you implement scaling for a web application on AWS?
Answer: good answer. Would use an auto-scaling group, ASG, with an elastic load balancer so instances are added or removed based on traffic. Review of the answer. This is the baseline fresher answer, correct but surface level. It shows you know the components, ASG plus ELB, but not the policies, metrics, or cost or availability trade-offs. To be interview competitive, explain triggers, health checks, cooldowns, and how scaling affects stateful components.
Better answer: auto-scaling with application load balancer plus health checks plus target tracking.
A practical implementation combines an application load balancer, ALB, with an auto-scaling group using a target tracking scaling policy. The ALB handles traffic distribution and health checks. The ASG automatically adjusts capacity based on a metric like average CPU or ALB request count per target. Use lifecycle hooks and graceful deregistration so instances finish in-flight requests before termination. Also use multiple AZs for resilience and set sensible cooldowns to avoid flapping. Review of the answer. This is a strong fresher to impressive answer. It shows operational thinking, graceful deregistration, AZ spread, target tracking. It can be improved by adding predictive scaling, spot/on-demand mixes, and cache or session strategies for stateful behavior. Here is a CloudFormation snippet, YAML, that creates an auto-scaling group with ALB target group integration. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the resource type that creates the ALB target group. This group is where your web instances register so the ALB can route HTTP traffic to them. Here is the setting that makes the ALB target actual EC2 instances, not IPS or Lambdas. It ensures the ALB checks instance health and sends traffic to healthy instances only. Here is the resource type that defines the auto-scaling group. This is the core of auto-scaling. It manages the EC2 fleet according to min/max/desired sizes. Here is the safety floor that guarantees at least 2 instances are available for high availability even during scale-in events. Here is where the ASG links to the ALB target group. When the ASG launches instances, they automatically register to this target group so the ALB can start sending traffic to them. Here is the health check mode that tells the ASG to rely on the ALB health checks, so only instances passing the ALB health probe are considered healthy.
Best answer: hybrid auto-scaling with target tracking, scheduled and predictive scaling, spot integration, and sticky state handling.
A production-ready scaling strategy combines multiple approaches: target tracking for real-time auto-scaling, scheduled scaling for predictable traffic, for example, business hours, and predictive scaling, if supported, to pre-warm capacity before traffic spikes. Use mixed instance policies or instance pools with Spot plus on-demand to reduce cost while maintaining baseline availability. For stateful concerns, prefer session affinity at cache or DB layer, Redis, DynamoDB, or externalize sessions. Add lifecycle hooks for graceful drain, CloudWatch alarms for anomalous patterns, and automated rollback in deployments to prevent bad code from causing scale storms. Review of the answer: this is an interview-winning answer. It demonstrates cost awareness, Spot, reliability, lifecycle hooks, AZs, operational automation, scheduled or predictive scaling, and application design considerations, statelessness or external session storage. Here is an auto-scaling target tracking scaling policy, JSON, that keeps average CPU at 50%. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that defines a target tracking policy. It behaves like a thermostat. AWS adjusts capacity to keep the chosen metric, here CPU, near the target value. Here is the metric choice: average CPU across the ASG. Using an ASG-level predefined metric simplifies scaling because AWS calculates the aggregate for you. Here is the operational target: keep average CPU around 50%. If CPU goes above, AWS scales out; if it drops below, AWS scales in, respecting cooldowns. Here is the safety flag that allows scale in when load reduces. You can set this to true during deployments to prevent premature scale in while new instances warm up.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
Interviewers ask this to evaluate whether you can design a resilient, cost-aware auto-scaling strategy, not just name services. They look for practical trade-offs: when to use target tracking versus scheduled scaling, how to handle session state, and how to keep systems stable during deployments and traffic spikes.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. Cloud-native product companies: Netflix, Atlassian, Shopify, focus on auto-scaling and resilience. 2. AWS and cloud partners, expect concrete ASG plus ALB plus scaling policy knowledge. 3. Fintech and high-availability services, Stripe, Paytm, evaluate cost versus availability trade-offs. 4. Startups, value Spot plus mixed instance auto-scaling to reduce costs quickly. 5. Enterprise consultancies, Accenture, Deloitte, test ability to propose predictable scaling and governance.
25. How do you handle caching and performance optimization in AWS DevOps?
Answer: good answer. We use Amazon CloudFront to cache content and ElastiCache for fast data retrieval. Review of the answer: this is correct but shallow. It lists services without explaining how they fit together or how caching improves system reliability and cost efficiency. To impress, you need to describe cache layers, invalidation strategies, TTL tuning, and monitoring impact.
Better answer: multi-layer caching with CloudFront and ElastiCache.
A solid DevOps setup uses CloudFront as a global edge cache for static assets, images, APIs, static JS or CSS, and ElastiCache, Redis or Memcached, as an in-memory cache for dynamic data or session management. CloudFront reduces latency by serving from edge locations, while ElastiCache minimizes database load by storing frequently accessed queries or computed results. CloudWatch metrics track hit or miss ratios and latency trends, ensuring data freshness and performance. Review of the answer: this is a strong operational answer. It connects global delivery, CloudFront, with local caching, ElastiCache. To elevate it further, mention invalidation automation, TTL control, and Lambda at edge for dynamic caching logic. Here is an AWS CloudFront distribution configuration, JSON, that caches API responses with a 5-minute TTL. Disclaimer: Always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the identifier linking this behavior to the backend API origin. This tells CloudFront where to fetch uncached content when a cache miss occurs. Here is the time to live, TTL, in seconds, 5 minutes, that defines how long cached responses stay valid before CloudFront revalidates them. Here is the setting that ensures all HTTP requests are automatically redirected to HTTPS for secure delivery through CloudFront.
Best answer: layered caching plus intelligent invalidation plus edge computing for performance optimization.
An advanced implementation combines CloudFront, edge caching, Elasticache, application caching, and API gateway or Lambda at edge, dynamic personalization. Caches are layered by data volatility, static content via CloudFront, user sessions, and computed results via Redis. Invalidation is automated. When a new deployment occurs, the CI/CD pipeline calls CloudFront's invalidation API to refresh caches. Redis keys use TTLs to expire stale data automatically. Monitoring via CloudWatch and Redis info metrics enables proactive tuning. Lambda at edge can modify cache behavior at the edge, for example, appending headers or varying TTL by user type. Review of the answer: this is a 10/10 production-grade response. It blends edge logic, dynamic invalidation, observability, and automation. It shows that you understand caching as a living, adaptive system rather than a static setup. Here is a Python code example using Boto 3 to automatically invalidate CloudFront cache after each deployment. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the initialization of the CloudFront client using Boto 3. It allows your deployment script to communicate with CloudFront directly from the CI/CD pipeline. Here is the API call that actually triggers the invalidation request. This removes cached content, like old JS or API responses, so users immediately get fresh content. Here is the wildcard path list specifying which objects to invalidate. Using ** clears the entire distribution cache after a new release. Here is the logging line that confirms cache invalidation was triggered, useful for deployment logs and debugging. Here is a Python Flask code snippet that uses Redis, Elasticache, for query caching in an API route. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the connection setup for Redis and Elasticache. This connects the Flask app to the in-memory cache cluster for low-latency data access. Here is the line that checks whether data is already cached in Redis. If present, it avoids a database query and serves instantly from memory. Here is the command that writes the query result to the cache with a TTL of 300 seconds, 5 minutes. This keeps data fresh and automatically expires it after the TTL.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
Caching and performance optimization show whether you can design efficient, cost-effective architectures. Interviewers look for multi-layer thinking, CDN, app cache, TTL tuning, invalidation automation, and how you prevent stale data or over-caching. Great answers show you understand performance as both an engineering and a business concern.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon. Expect discussion of CloudFront invalidations and Lambda at edge tuning. 2. Netflix and Shopify. Focus on CDN efficiency and latency reduction patterns. 3. FinTech, Stripe, Paytm, Razorpay. Evaluate data freshness, caching with Redis, and cost control. 4. Consultancies, Accenture, Deloitte. Expect full life cycle automation through CI/CD integration. 5. Startups, value simple and fast cache strategies that improve user experience and reduce AWS bills.
Please check description or comment section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem solving, generally most asked, and system design. Required for your AWS and DevOps jobs interviews like AWS Cloud Migration Specialist jobs, AWS Cloud Financial Analyst jobs, AWS Solution Architect jobs, Cloud Security Engineer jobs, Kubernetes Admin or Engineer or Architect or Developer jobs, DevOps ISE Engineer jobs, DevOps Metrics and Observability Engineer jobs, DevOps CI or CD Engineer jobs, AWS DevOps Engineer jobs, Cloud DevOps Engineer jobs, AWS Java or Python Developer jobs, DevOps Engineer jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section, these questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people. Also for your interviews, you people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
26. How do you design CI/CD pipelines for multi-environment deployments, dev, QA, prod, in AWS?
Answer: good answer. I create separate pipelines or stages for dev, QA and prod so each environment gets its own deployment flow. Review of the answer: this is the simple fresher level response. It shows basic awareness but lacks strategy. Interviewers expect you to discuss promotion mechanics, parameterization, environment isolation, approval gates, and how to secure credentials between stages.
Better answer: parameterized pipelines with environment stages and manual approval gates.
A practical design uses a single parameterized pipeline with distinct stages for dev to QA to prod. The pipeline builds a single artifact, container image or CloudFormation template, and promotes the same artifact across environments to ensure parity. Each deploy stage reads environment-specific parameters, from SSM parameter store or parameter overrides, and includes manual approval gates before prod. IAM roles with least privilege are used per stage to limit who or what can deploy to each environment. Review of the answer: this is strong and interview-friendly. It emphasizes artifact immutability, environment parity, and governance. To reach best, add automatic tests, canary or promote strategies, and secrets handling per environment. Here is a simplified AWS CodePipeline YAML that builds once and deploys the same artifact to dev and prod with manual approval before prod. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the artifact passing mechanism. The pipeline builds a single artifact, build output, which is promoted across environments to ensure the exact same artifact is tested and released. Here is the field that deploys to the dev stack. The dev stage uses the same template as later stages but may read environment-specific parameters at deploy time. Here is the IAM role the pipeline assumes when deploying to dev. Least privilege roles per environment are critical for secure deployments. Here is the manual approval action before prod. This gate is where QA or a release manager confirms readiness before production changes proceed. Here is the final production stack name. Notice the pipeline uses the same build output template to maintain artifact immutability across environments. Here is the distinct production deploy role. Production roles should be more restricted and audited than dev roles.
Best answer: promotion pipelines with automated tests, canary or cutover options, and environment isolation.
The best design builds once, runs automated unit/integration/end-to-end tests in CI, and then promotes the exact artifact through dev to QA to staging to prod. Promotion includes automated smoke tests, integration tests against isolated test VPCs, and optional canary or blue-green steps for prod. Secrets are injected at runtime from secrets manager or parameter store tied to the stage role, logs and traces are sent to a centralized observability account, and rollbacks are automated via CloudFormation change sets or CodeDeploy rollbacks if health checks fail. Everything is parameterized so the same template accepts environment-specific values but the core artifact is identical across stages. Here is an example CodeBuild build spec.yaml that runs tests and produces an artifact used by the pipeline. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the unit test command executed during pre-build. Running tests in CI validates that code changes meet basic correctness before any environment sees them. Here is the packaging step that creates the artifact, myapp.zip. This artifact is then uploaded and promoted by the pipeline to each environment. Here is the artifact's declaration. It tells CodeBuild which files to treat as the pipeline artifact for subsequent stages.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
Interviewers ask this to verify you understand promotion strategies, artifact immutability, and governance in CI/CD. They want to see that you can prevent environment drift, enforce approvals, and integrate testing or rollback so deployments are safe and repeatable.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. Cloud-native product companies, Netflix, Atlassian, Shopify, expect artifact immutability and promotion workflows. 2. AWS/cloud partners, focus on least privilege roles and cross-account deployment practices. 3. Fintech firms, Stripe, Paytm, emphasize approval gates and automated testing before prod. 4. Consulting firms, Deloitte, Accenture, look for multi-environment governance and rollback strategies. 5. Startups, value simple, fast promotion pipelines that maintain parity across environments.
27. How do you manage observability, logs, metrics, traces, in AWS DevOps?
Answer: good answer. We use CloudWatch for metrics and logs and X-ray for tracing. Review of the answer: this is a correct baseline, but it's incomplete. Observability is more than a list of tools, it's about structured logs, trace correlation, alert tuning, and integrating telemetry into CI/CD and incident workflows. Interviewers want to know how you turn data into action.
Better answer: structured logs plus centralized metrics plus end-to-end tracing.
A practical observability strategy combines structured JSON logs, CloudWatch logs, aggregated metrics, CloudWatch metrics plus custom metrics, and distributed traces, AWS X-ray or OpenTelemetry. Logs are tagged with request IDs to correlate with traces. Metrics drive dashboards and SLO-based alerts, traces reveal latency hotspots across services. All telemetry streams into a central observability account for unified dashboards, and alerts are tuned to avoid noise using composite alarms and anomaly detection. Here is a CloudWatch logs insights query that computes error rate per minute and shows the top slow endpoints. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that selects the essential fields: timestamp for ordering, message for content, path for endpoint grouping, and duration for latency analysis. Here is the filter that keeps only error messages or slow requests, duration greater than 2000 milliseconds. This narrows results to the problematic traces you must investigate. Here is the aggregation that counts errors and computes average latency per path every minute, ideal for driving alerts and spotting slow endpoints quickly.
Best answer: correlate logs, metrics and traces into SLO-driven alerting and automated remediation.
The best practice ties observability into reliability goals, define SLIs or SLOs, error rate, P95 latency, create dashboards, and configure alerts that map to SLO burn rates. Use traces to root cause alerts and automated runbooks for common failures. Instrument services with OpenTelemetry or X-ray, push custom metrics from applications, and centralized telemetry for cross-service correlation. Integrate alerts with incident management, PagerDuty, and CI/CD, open a rollback or patch pipeline automatically on certain alarm conditions. Here is a Python AWS X-ray instrumentation snippet that captures service calls and subsegments. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the import that enables X-ray integration. It gives you the recorder object for creating segments and subsegments across SDK calls. Here is the line that instruments supported libraries automatically, like requests. It saves you manual tracing calls for basic SDK calls. Here is the decorator that captures the top-level function as a trace segment, making it easy to search traces for specific handler executions. Here is the line that attaches an annotation, user_ID, to the segment. Annotations make traces filterable in the X-ray console and help correlate with logs. Here is the call that starts a subsegment for finer-grained tracing of an operation, parsing. Subsegments pinpoint which internal step caused latency. Here is a CloudWatch composite alarm JSON that fires when either high error rate or high latency alarms trigger. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the human-readable name of the composite alarm. Use clear names so runbooks map alarms to playbooks quickly. Here is the composite rule. It combines two child alarms, error alarm and latency alarm. The composite fires only when one or both underlying conditions are met, great for reducing noisy, low-signal alerts. Here is the SNS topic where the composite alarm sends notifications. This centralizes operational alerts for the on-call team.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
Observability shows whether you can convert telemetry into action. Interviewers ask to check if you can instrument systems, correlate data, and create meaningful alerts that reduce incident resolution time. The best candidates demonstrate SLO-driven monitoring and link telemetry to automated remediation and CI/CD.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon expect deep knowledge of CloudWatch, X-ray, and OpenTelemetry integration. 2. Product companies, Netflix, Atlassian, Shopify, focus on trace correlation and SLOs. 3. FinTech, Stripe, Paytm, emphasize observability with low-noise alerts and compliance retention. 4. Consultancies, Accenture, Deloitte, ask about centralizing telemetry across accounts. 5. Startups, value practical, SLO-driven monitoring that prevents noisy paging.
28. How would you implement automated testing and rollback in AWS deployments?
Answer: good answer. Would use AWS CodeBuild for testing and CodeDeploy for rollback. Review of the answer: this response is technically correct but too shallow. It does not show understanding of what automated testing actually means in CI/CD pipelines or how rollback logic is triggered automatically. Interviewers expect you to describe what to test, when to test, and how rollback integrates with deployment health checks.
Better answer: add testing stages in CI/CD and automate rollback on failed health checks.
A practical approach is to include automated unit and integration tests within CodeBuild or CodePipeline stages before deployment. After deployment, use AWS CodeDeploy or CloudFormation change sets that automatically roll back if health checks fail. For example, CodeDeploy can monitor target groups in an application load balancer, ALB. If deployment causes increased 5xx errors or failing instances, it auto-triggers rollback to the previous revision. Review of the answer: this answer demonstrates understanding of pipeline orchestration and safety. To reach best, describe pre-deployment validation, canary releases, and test result storage for audit and analytics. Here is a code pipeline snippet in YAML that adds a test stage before deployment and integrates rollback hooks. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the stage where automated tests run before any deployment happens, ensuring that broken builds never reach production. Here is the specific code build action that executes your test suite. You can attach build spec files to run PyTest, Maven, or NPM tests. Here is the deploy provider. CodeDeploy handles deployments to EC2, ECS, or Lambda, and supports built-in rollback if health checks fail. Here is the configuration line that activates automatic rollback. CodeDeploy monitors alarms and health checks. If they fail, it reverts to the last known good revision. Here is where you define rollback triggers, for example, failed deployments or alarms that signal degraded performance.
Best answer: canary testing, health checks, and storing test results for continuous improvement.
The best answer includes canary or blue-green deployment strategies with automated health checks. Before routing full traffic, a small subset of users is tested. If metrics stay healthy, full rollout proceeds. Test results, logs, and coverage reports are stored in S3 for auditing. Rollbacks are triggered automatically if latency or error rate thresholds breach CloudWatch alarms. This makes pipelines self-healing, ensuring minimal downtime and continuous learning from failures. Here is an AWS CodeDeploy deployment configuration in JSON that defines canary rollout and rollback behavior. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the configuration name indicating a canary rollout. Only 10% of traffic is shifted initially and the rest after 15 minutes if no issues appear. Here is the routing mode that defines time-based canary rollout. Traffic gradually moves to the new version instead of all at once. Here is the exact traffic slice that receives the new version first, a small, safe portion of users to detect any production anomalies early. Here is the block that defines rollback behavior. It enables automatic reversion when health checks fail or CloudWatch alarms trigger. Here is the list of rollback triggers. If a deployment fails or a monitoring alarm is raised, CodeDeploy instantly rolls back to the previous stable task set.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
This question reveals whether you understand safe deployment practices and failure handling. Interviewers look for automation in quality assurance, canary or blue-green releases, and rollback mechanisms that ensure reliability without manual intervention. A confident fresher explains both pre-deployment testing and post-deployment health monitoring.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. Amazon and AWS emphasize automated testing and rollback in production pipelines. 2. Product firms, Netflix, Atlassian, Shopify, expect canary or blue-green deployment familiarity. 3. Fintech, Goldman Sachs, Stripe, Paytm, focus on zero downtime, auditable deployments. 4. Consulting companies, Accenture, Deloitte, look for rollback governance for large multi-client systems. 5. Startups, value pragmatic solutions with simple alarms and fast rollbacks.
29. Curveball question: how would you handle an AWS region-wide outage in a DevOps environment?
Answer: good answer, I would switch traffic to another region. Review of the answer: this answer shows awareness but lacks execution depth. Saying, I would switch regions doesn't prove you understand multi-region architecture, replication, or DNS failover. You need to show how your automation and observability support regional resilience.
Better answer: use multi-region architecture with Route 53 health checks and automated failover.
A practical AWS DevOps setup includes multi-region deployment where primary and secondary regions mirror critical services. Route 53 health checks monitor endpoints. If the primary region becomes unhealthy, Route 53 automatically fails over DNS to the standby region. Data replication happens via S3 cross-region replication and DynamoDB global tables. CI/CD pipelines deploy infrastructure in both regions, ensuring synchronization. Review of the answer: this answer reflects real-world understanding. To make it a best answer, demonstrate proactive automation, how you detect outages, trigger failover, and later restore normal operations without manual steps. Here is a Route 53 health check and failover DNS record configuration in JSON. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line specifying HTTPS health checks. Route 53 regularly pings the endpoint/health path over HTTPS to ensure it's alive. Here is the configuration that says if 3 consecutive checks fail, Route 53 considers the endpoint unhealthy and triggers DNS failover. Here is where this record is declared the primary region target. Route 53 will redirect traffic to the secondary record when this one fails health checks. Here is the TTL, time to live, for DNS caching, set low, for example, 60 seconds, so failover happens quickly when health changes.
Best answer: detect, trigger, recover, fully automated regional resilience with AWS Event Bridge and IAC.
The best approach makes regional failover part of your DevOps automation. Event Bridge monitors CloudWatch metrics for regional unavailability, for example, failed API calls or CloudWatch alarms. When triggered, an Event Bridge rule launches a Lambda function that updates Route 53 DNS and promotes secondary infrastructure. Terraform or CloudFormation templates maintain both regions' infrastructure as code, ensuring identical configurations. After recovery, automated scripts sync data back to the primary region. This ensures continuous uptime without manual human intervention. Here is an AWS Lambda Python snippet that switches Route 53 DNS to a secondary region on region outage. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line initializing a Route 53 client using Boto 3. This allows the Lambda function to manipulate DNS records dynamically. Here is the command that actually performs the DNS update. It switches traffic routing to the secondary region's endpoint. Here is the field indicating the secondary region's DNS record, which becomes active once the primary region fails health checks. Here is the time to live setting again, ensuring fast DNS propagation. Low TTL means failover traffic reroutes within a minute. Here is the confirmation log line showing that failover has been executed successfully. These logs help validate the automation during chaos testing.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
This question tests how you think during chaos. Interviewers want to see if you understand disaster recovery automation, DNS-based failover, and multi-region replication. A great answer shows resilience planning, not panic, how you detect outages, failover smoothly, and later restore the system safely.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. Amazon, Netflix, and Shopify test regional failover readiness with real-world chaos scenarios. 2. Fintech, Goldman Sachs, PayPal, focus on zero downtime and compliance in DR strategies. 3. Enterprise SaaS, Atlassian, Salesforce, look for automated failover pipelines and IAC parity. 4. Consultancies, Deloitte, Accenture, ask about resilience across multi-account, multi-region client deployments. 5. Startups, want scrappy but reliable failover automation without complex tooling.
30. Curveball question: if your AWS code pipeline takes too long, how would you optimize it?
Answer: good answer. I would check which stage is slow and try to make it faster. Review of the answer: this is what most candidates say, but it's vague and reactive. It doesn't explain how to find bottlenecks or what optimizations are possible inside CodePipeline. The interviewer expects you to discuss profiling, parallelization, caching, and stage-level reconfiguration.
Better answer: profile pipeline stages, add caching, and parallelize independent actions.
A strong answer starts with measurement. Enable AWS CloudWatch metrics for each code pipeline stage and identify where delays occur: source, build, test, deploy. Next, add CodeBuild caching to reuse dependencies, and configure parallel actions for independent tests. For instance, front-end and back-end builds can run in parallel CodeBuild projects. Store build artifacts in S3 or EFS for reuse. Reduce dependency fetch times using container images with pre-installed packages. Review of the answer: this is a good structured answer. It's proactive and practical, showing awareness of parallelism and caching. But you can make it best by describing pipeline redesign, asynchronous triggers, and event-driven optimizations that improve total runtime dramatically. Here is an AWS CodeBuild build spec YAML using layer caching and parallelized build jobs. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that enables dependency caching. It reuses installed packages between builds, avoiding repeated downloads and cutting minutes off runtime. Here is the test command optimized for fail fast. It stops immediately after the first failure, saving time during CI feedback loops. Here is the build line using a commit-based tag. This ensures version traceability while leveraging Docker layer caching for faster rebuilds. Here is the cache section that defines paths for persistent caching. Pip, Maven, and Node modules are stored and reused across builds.
Best answer: use event-driven pipelines, smart triggers, and modular micropipelines for speed.
The best approach redesigns the pipeline itself. Instead of running the entire pipeline for every commit, use AWS EventBridge to trigger only the affected module's micropipeline, for example, front-end versus back-end. Employ parallel code build projects using CodePipeline, parallel actions, and consolidate results with AWS step functions. Artifacts are passed through S3 or ECR references. Long-running integration tests move to asynchronous workflows. This design cuts average runtime drastically while preserving reliability. Here is an AWS EventBridge rule JSON that triggers a specific code pipeline only when backend code changes. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the field that listens to AWS code commit events, meaning the rule triggers whenever code changes occur in the repository. Here is where you specify the exact repository ARN. Only commits to this backend repository will fire the pipeline trigger. Here is the branch filter. Only changes on the main branch trigger this pipeline, preventing unnecessary builds from feature branches. Here is the code pipeline target ARN. This is the specific pipeline that EventBridge triggers asynchronously when relevant code changes occur. Here is the unique identifier for this EventBridge target. It helps in tracing events and troubleshooting triggers in the EventBridge dashboard.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
This question tests optimization and problem solving, whether you can think beyond correctness and focus on speed and efficiency. Interviewers want to see if you understand caching, parallelism, event-driven triggers, and build reuse. The best answers balance speed with reliability, showing DevOps maturity and operational empathy.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. Amazon and AWS. Check knowledge of code pipeline internals and optimization metrics. 2. Product companies. Netflix, Shopify, focus on event-driven, modular pipelines. 3. Fintech, Stripe, Revolut, value shorter lead times and optimized testing cycles. 4. Consulting firms, Accenture, Deloitte, want cost-optimized pipelines for multiple clients. 5. Startups, look for engineers who can minimize build time and maximize deployment velocity.
Please check description or comment section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem solving, generally most asked, and system design. Required for your AWS and DevOps jobs interviews like AWS Cloud Migration Specialist jobs, AWS Cloud Financial Analyst jobs, AWS Solution Architect jobs, Cloud Security Engineer jobs, Kubernetes Admin or Engineer or Architect or Developer jobs, DevOps ISE Engineer jobs, DevOps Metrics and Observability Engineer jobs, DevOps CI or CD Engineer jobs, AWS DevOps Engineer jobs, Cloud DevOps Engineer jobs, AWS Java or Python Developer jobs, DevOps Engineer jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section. These questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people. Also for your interviews, you people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
31. Curveball question. A Lambda-based deployment fails in production. How would you troubleshoot it?
Answer. Good answer. I would check CloudWatch logs to see what went wrong. Review of the answer. This is a safe starting point but too surface level. Every fresher says this. The interviewer wants to know your step-by-step process, from detection to RCA, including environment isolation, rollback, and testing. Simply saying, check logs doesn't prove systematic troubleshooting.
Better answer. Check CloudWatch logs, environment variables, and recent deployment changes.
A practical fresher-level troubleshooting plan starts with CloudWatch logs. Look for runtime errors, cold start issues, or missing dependencies. Then verify Lambda environment variables, maybe secrets or config parameters are missing. Next, check the latest deployment in CodeDeploy or SAM to ensure the correct artifact version was deployed. If the issue is in configuration, redeploy with fixed parameters or roll back to the previous version. Review of the answer. This answer is clear and methodical. It shows ownership and awareness of Lambda's operational model. To make it great, include deeper debugging like tracing, IAM permissions, and integration failures. Real-world production issues often lie there. Here is a Python snippet that shows how to retrieve and inspect Lambda error logs using Boto 3 and CloudWatch logs. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the initialization line that connects to AWS CloudWatch logs. It lets your script pull and inspect Lambda execution logs automatically. Here is the command that lists log streams ordered by recent activity, ensuring you fetch the most recent execution logs for debugging. Here is the line that grabs the most recent stream. This corresponds to the latest Lambda execution where failure occurred. Here is the conditional that filters log messages containing error. This helps you isolate stack traces and fault details quickly.
Best answer. Use tracing, version rollback, and permissions audit to find root cause fast.
A production-grade troubleshooting process starts by confirming the failure scope. Is it a specific API gateway integration, an IAM permission issue, or a new version deployment bug? Use AWS X-Ray to trace the full request path and detect latency or timeout issues. Next, check CloudTrail for any IAM policy or role changes affecting execution. If needed, roll back to the previous Lambda version or alias using AWS CLI. Finally, once the fix is identified, automate regression tests and add a new CloudWatch alarm to detect similar issues early next time. Here is a CLI command sequence to roll back to the previous Lambda version and enable tracing with X-Ray. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that enables AWS X-Ray tracing. It lets you capture detailed request flows, latency spikes, and dependency issues for this Lambda function. Here is the command that freezes the current state of the function as a new version, allowing you to promote or roll back versions safely. Here is the line that points the live alias to version 5. In this example, it rolls back production to a stable, known good version instantly.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
This question checks your real-world debugging instincts. Anyone can describe deployment steps, only those who understand monitoring, tracing, rollback, and configuration management can handle production failures calmly. Interviewers look for structured thought, detection to diagnosis to rollback to prevention.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. Amazon and AWS, focus on X-ray tracing and Lambda rollback techniques. 2. Netflix and Twilio, expect observability and graceful degradation handling. 3. FinTech, Stripe, Revolut, Paytm, care about incident mitigation speed. 4. Consulting firms, Deloitte, TCS, assess how candidates handle customer-impacting failures. 5. Startups, test your ability to debug fast without external tools or large teams.
32. Curveball question: you've joined as a fresher in a DevOps team, what would you automate first in your AWS environment, and why?
Answer: good answer, would automate deployments using scripts or Jenkins. Review of the answer: this is a common fresher response. It shows enthusiasm for automation but lacks prioritization and context. Interviewers want to see that you understand what to automate first for maximum impact, not just doing automation for automation's sake.
Better answer: automate infrastructure provisioning and environment setup first.
As a fresher, the most valuable automation is in repeatable setups, like creating development or staging environments. Instead of manually creating EC2, S3, or IAM roles, I'd start with AWS CloudFormation or Terraform templates. This ensures every environment is consistent and version controlled. I'd also add simple tagging automation using AWS Lambda so that all resources have owner and cost tags. This helps both DevOps and finance teams track usage easily. Review of the answer: this answer is well thought out, it shows maturity in prioritizing automation that saves time and reduces human error. To elevate it further, describe how you'd combine provisioning with monitoring or alerting, turning automation into full lifecycle management. Here is an AWS CloudFormation YAML snippet to automate EC2 provisioning with environment tagging. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the CloudFormation resource type. It declares that this stack will create an EC2 instance automatically as part of the environment setup. Here is the specific AMI ID used. This ensures the instance boots with the correct operating system and baseline configuration every time. Here is the section that automates tagging. By default, every EC2 instance gets environment and owner tags, enabling cost allocation and quick resource identification.
Best answer: automate the full feedback loop, from provisioning to alerting and cleanup.
Once basic provisioning automation is in place, I'd extend it by connecting it to monitoring and cleanup automation. For example, use AWS CloudWatch to detect unused EC2 instances and trigger a Lambda function that stops or terminates them automatically. This saves cost and prevents environment sprawl. I'd also include Slack notifications whenever an automation triggers an action, ensuring transparency and learning for the team. This makes automation not just a script, but a feedback system that improves over time. Here is a Python Lambda function that detects idle EC2 instances and automatically stops them. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that connects to AWS CloudWatch. It allows the Lambda to pull CPU utilization metrics for the target EC2 instance. Here is the API call that fetches CPU usage data. It looks for average CPU utilization over the last hour to detect underutilization. Here is the threshold logic: if CPU usage is below 5%, the instance is considered idle and is eligible for stopping. Here is the action that stops the identified EC2 instance. It enforces cost savings automatically without manual intervention. Here is the final log statement. It records which instance was stopped, enabling monitoring and auditability.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
This question tests strategic thinking. They want to see whether you prioritize automation that delivers measurable value, not just scripts. It reveals if you understand lifecycle management, setup, usage, and cleanup. A strong answer shows that you can balance simplicity with impact and learn quickly from your environment.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon look for clarity in prioritizing impactful automation tasks. 2. Startups prefer candidates who automate environment provisioning and cost controls first. 3. Fintech, Stripe, Razorpay, Revolut value automation that prevents manual errors and enforces compliance. 4. IT services, Infosys, TCS, Accenture, test understanding of infrastructure as code basics. 5. Product companies, Atlassian, Adobe, Shopify, focus on feedback loop automation with alerts and transparency.
33. Curveball question. A senior engineer says your automation scripts are too complex. How would you simplify them without losing functionality?
Answer. Good answer. Would try to comment the code and make it easier to read. Review of the answer. That's a good instinct, but superficial. Comments help, but true simplicity means redesigning logic, reducing duplication, and structuring scripts for reusability. Interviewers want to see that you can refactor, modularize, and document effectively, not just patch readability.
Better answer. Break complex scripts into reusable functions and add clear input parameters.
The best way to simplify automation is to split one large, monolithic script into smaller, reusable components. For example, instead of having a single 500-line deployment script, I would modularize it, one file for environment setup, one for build logic, and one for cleanup. Each function should take parameters like environment name or region instead of hard-coding values. This not only improves readability but also allows automation to scale across multiple teams. Review of the answer. This is a very good fresher-level answer. It shows understanding of modularity, parameterization, and maintainability. You can elevate it by actually showing how functions replace repeated logic, making scripts both readable and testable. Here is a bash example showing how to modularize AWS environment setup with functions. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the function definition for creating an S3 bucket. It encapsulates logic for resource creation instead of repeating AWS CLI commands multiple times. Here is the line that actually creates the S3 bucket dynamically. It uses a parameter rather than hard-coding the bucket name. Here is the deployment function. It handles AWS CodeDeploy packaging and upload to S3, making it reusable for multiple applications. Here is the cleanup function. It ensures that every automation run starts fresh by deleting leftover temporary files. Here is how the main script executes the modular functions. Each task is now clearly separated, improving readability and debugging.
Best answer. Introduce configuration files, logging, and minimal dependencies for clean design.
After modularization, I would externalize all configurations, like region, S3 names, and environment variables, into a YAML or JSON file. This makes the script generic and reduces maintenance effort. I'd also add structured logging to track what happens in each step. Finally, I'd remove any unnecessary dependencies so new team members can run the automation easily without setup pain. This converts complex scripts into production-ready, auditable tools that anyone can use confidently. Here is a Python refactor that replaces hard-coded logic with a config file and structured logging. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that reads configuration values from a JSON file. Instead of hard-coding, it loads reusable settings like region and bucket names. Here is where the configuration file is parsed, converting the JSON data into a Python dictionary for dynamic reference throughout the script. Here is the command that creates the S3 bucket, now parameterized from the configuration file for flexibility and clarity. Here is the logging line. It replaces print statements with timestamped logs, improving traceability and debugging clarity.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
This question tests code ownership and maturity. Interviewers want to see if you value maintainability and readability as much as functionality. They check if you can simplify logic, modularize workflows, and design for others to understand, a key leadership trait even as a fresher. Simplicity is the most underrated skill in DevOps.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. AWS and Amazon, focus on reusable, parameterized automation logic. 2. Atlassian and Shopify, value code readability and team maintainability. 3. Fintech firms, Razorpay, Revolut, Paytm, emphasize audit-ready automation. 4. Consulting companies, Accenture, Deloitte, assess collaborative script design. 5. Startups, look for engineers who can simplify and scale automation fast.
34. Curveball question. Your automation caused a production issue. How do you recover and prevent it next time?
Answer. Good answer. I would fix the issue quickly and tell my team. Review of the answer. This is an honest but immature answer. It shows good intent but lacks structure, no rollback plan, no root cause analysis, no prevention mindset. Interviewers want to see calm, systematic recovery steps, not panic or blame.
Better answer. Roll back first, identify the root cause, and communicate transparently.
The best immediate action is to roll back the faulty change using version control or infrastructure as code. Once stability is restored, use CloudWatch or CloudTrail to identify what triggered the issue. Then, inform your team and stakeholders clearly about what happened, what was affected, and how it was fixed. Create a short post-mortem document summarizing the root cause. Finally, apply the 5 whys method to trace whether it was a code, config, or process gap. Review of the answer. This answer demonstrates accountability and calm thinking. You've moved from firefighting to recovery and transparency. To make it best, show how you would automate this recovery and learning process using AWS tools. Here is a CLI command sequence to roll back a faulty Lambda deployment using AWS aliases. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the Lambda function name. It specifies which function is being rolled back to a previous version. Here is the version number you're rolling back to. This instantly restores the last stable version of your production code. Here is the command that sends a real-time alert through SNS, notifying your operations team about the rollback action. Here is the message payload. It records what happened and why, ensuring post-incident visibility and accountability.
Best answer. Automate detection, rollback, and postmortem creation.
After restoring stability, I would automate both detection and documentation. First, configure CloudWatch alarms to detect error spikes and trigger rollback workflows using AWS step functions. Then, automate a postmortem draft using Lambda to capture event logs, change IDs, and timestamps from CloudTrail. Finally, integrate Slack or Teams notifications to alert the DevOps channel automatically. This shows not just recovery, but continuous learning, a hallmark of great DevOps culture. Here is a Python Lambda function that triggers rollback and logs a postmortem when error rates exceed threshold. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that performs the rollback. It points the live alias of the Lambda function back to the last stable version. Here is the dictionary that builds a structured log. It includes which function was rolled back, to what version, and when. Here is the notification trigger. It publishes a JSON payload to the SNS topic so the ops team immediately knows the rollback occurred. Here is the log output. It confirms that the rollback action completed successfully, improving traceability and confidence.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
This question tests ownership, emotional stability, and DevOps maturity. Everyone makes mistakes, but great engineers know how to recover gracefully. Interviewers use this to see if you panic or take methodical steps. They also look for evidence of postmortem culture, rollback mechanisms, and prevention strategies.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. Amazon and AWS, test for rollback automation and post-incident learning. 2. Netflix, look for resilience thinking and system recovery culture. 3. FinTech, PayPal, Stripe, Revolut, check for reliability and zero downtime practices. 4. Startups, assess your reaction under production pressure. 5. Consulting and cloud partners, Deloitte, TCS, Capgemini, look for structured RCA and communication ability.
35. How do you perform post-incident analysis and continuous improvement in AWS DevOps?
Answer: good answer. After an incident, we find the root cause and fix it. Review of the answer: this is what most candidates say, but it sounds reactive and shallow. It misses the structured process of post-incident learning, tracking metrics, and preventing recurrence. Interviewers expect you to describe how you perform root cause analysis and feed learnings back into automation and monitoring.
Better answer: use structured post-incident reviews with metrics and RCA documentation.
A professional approach to post-incident analysis in AWS DevOps involves structured root cause analysis, RCA, using tools like AWS CloudWatch metrics, X-ray traces, and AWS config timelines. Once the cause is found, we document the 5 whys, classify the failure, code issue, infra drift, misconfiguration, human error, and raise an action item in the backlog. AWS Systems Manager Ops Center or Jira can track these action items. This ensures every incident leads to a fix or improvement. Review of the answer: this answer is strong, it covers detection, RCA, and tracking. To make it great, you should connect it with how automation or monitoring gets updated as a result of that learning. Here is an AWS CloudWatch Insights query that helps find the root cause by correlating error logs and latency spikes. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the line that selects timestamp, message, latency, and service, providing the basic context for time and component correlation. Here is the filter that isolates error messages and slow transactions. This lets you focus on high latency or failing requests during the outage. Here is the aggregation that counts errors and calculates average latency per service in 5-minute intervals, perfect for detecting patterns and correlation between spikes.
Best answer: automate learnings, postmortems, dashboards, and incident prevention.
In mature AWS DevOps environments, post-incident analysis is fully integrated into the feedback loop. Once the root cause is identified, new monitoring rules and CI/CD checks are added automatically. For example, EventBridge can trigger a Lambda function that updates CloudWatch alarms or modifies deployment configs to prevent repeat failures. We also maintain a postmortem document in Confluence or AWS SSM Ops item, focusing not on blame, but on resilience improvements. Over time, this builds an evolving incident knowledge base and measurable reduction in MTTR, mean time to recovery. Here is an AWS Lambda Python script that automatically adds a new CloudWatch alarm after post-incident review. Disclaimer: always test code in a non-production environment. Here is the initialization line that connects to AWS CloudWatch. This allows the Lambda function to create or modify alarms programmatically. Here is the line that dynamically reads the alarm name from the event payload. If not provided, it defaults to high error rate auto added for RCA-driven automation. Here is the API call that actually creates the CloudWatch alarm. It adds a new metric threshold to catch future anomalies early. Here is the SNS action ARN that triggers notifications. Once the alarm fires, the operations team receives alerts automatically.
Why interviewers ask this question most often?
This question checks if you can move beyond fixing and start learning. Post-incident analysis and continuous improvement are what differentiate a technician from an engineer. Companies look for candidates who can transform downtime into data and build preventive automation that improves reliability with each incident.
Which companies ask this question more often?
1. Amazon and Google expect RCA and continuous improvement culture in all SRE or DevOps interviews. 2. Product startups, Notion, Slack, Datadog, focus on blameless postmortems and feedback loops. 3. Fintech, Stripe, PayPal, Razorpay, emphasize auditability and compliance in RCA documentation. 4. Enterprises, TCS, Accenture, Capgemini, value systematic reporting and prevention of recurrences. 5. Cloud-native companies, Snowflake, HashiCorp, want candidates who can codify reliability into automation.
Final takeaway: what makes a fresher stand out in AWS DevOps interviews?
Being a fresher in AWS DevOps isn't a disadvantage, it's an opportunity. You've just seen how to turn beginner-level questions into professional-grade answers using the good to better to best framework. Every answer wasn't about memorizing tools, it was about thinking in systems, acting with ownership, and automating with impact. If you can show that mindset, structured problem solving, clarity under pressure, and a hunger to learn, you'll stand out in any interview. AWS DevOps isn't about knowing every service, it's about connecting the dots and learning fast. That's what this series has prepared you for.
Here's your AWS DevOps Fresher Success Formula.
1. Focus on impactful automation. Scripts that save time or money matter more than fancy code. 2. Always explain why you did something, not just what you did. 3. Use AWS native services smartly. CloudWatch, CodePipeline, Lambda, CloudFormation. 4. Think in life cycles, set up to observe to optimize to recover. 5. Never panic under failure, roll back, communicate, and learn.
Final message, from Fresher to DevOps Engineer.
If you've made it this far, you're already thinking beyond a fresher. Remember, every automation you write, every metric you track, and every problem you debug is shaping you into the engineer team's trust in production. Keep learning. Keep automating. Keep improving, that's real DevOps.
Please check description or comment section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked and system design. Required for your AWS and DevOps jobs interviews like AWS Cloud Migration Specialist jobs, AWS Cloud Financial Analyst jobs, AWS Solution Architect jobs, Cloud Security Engineer jobs, Kubernetes Admin or Engineer or Architect or Developer jobs, DevOps ISE Engineer jobs, DevOps Metrics and Observability Engineer jobs, DevOps CI or CD Engineer jobs, AWS DevOps Engineer jobs, Cloud DevOps Engineer jobs, AWS Java or Python Developer jobs, DevOps Engineer jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section, these questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people. Also for your interviews, you people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links. For more exciting tips, tricks and more importantly, for valuable insights of interviews, please share, like, and subscribe to my channel. It has a lot of valuable information about various insights of interviews. It has a wide range of real-world portfolio projects of various technologies for interviews, and it has wide range of most asked interview questions and answers of various technologies like data science, SAP, AWS, DevOps, and full-stack web development, and more. That will be useful during interviews. It has a wide range of most asked interview questions and answers and real-world portfolio projects of various technologies for freshers, for 2 to 3 years, experienced candidates, and for 5 or above years, experienced candidates to test their skills by knowing most asked interview questions and make themselves ready for interviews.